Danum no doka yanerigit yo wezigit segm weza atste danum segm dort gatusne gonzo sum atanum nya degum yimhe agwegum gwari wage ne dai de wari wasne danum tukinani guni agiro. Okay, onagi for now. Thank you. Ona numa.
Anna.
Alrighty, thank you for that. Hello, everyone, and officially also welcome those of you in the space and over Zoom to the Mohawk Warrior Society. This book launch event is part of a 2-day series of events and film screenings that foreground Kanien'kehá activism, culture, and current issues within the broader rubric of Indigenous sovereignty. We are so pleased you could join us in person here today or over Zoom. Very quickly, just to situate you, we are streaming on YouTube Live from Concordia University's 4th Space. And if you are new to 4th Space, I'll just quickly tell you that well, first of all, welcome once again. What we do here is collaborate with our university community to activate the many research projects and initiatives in developments and conversations that are happening across the university by co-creating engaging activities daily. We will have a chance to hear from a few folks who have joined us in the space today. And those of you joining us by Zoom, we'd love to hear from you as well. If you have questions or comments, feel free to turn on your video, raise a hand or raise a virtual hand, pop something into the chat, and we'll make sure to share it with everyone here in the space. If you are in the space and you have a question or comment, it'll just be important to let us know that you'd like to speak by raising a hand so we can get a handheld mic to you so that we could hear you in the stream and over Zoom. And on that note, I think that's it for me. We hope you have a great conversation, everyone. And I'll pass it over to Professor in the Department of Art History and the organizer for this event, Cynthia Hammond. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Anna. Bonjour, bienvenue. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Garanata, for your opening words for all of us today. My name is Dr. Cynthia Hammond, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the launch of the Mohawk Warrior Society and to today's roundtable on Ganienkehá activism, sovereignty, and resistance. I want to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands. Concordia recognizes the Kanien'kehá Nation as the custodians of the lands and waters that we gather upon today, whether in person or virtually. Tiohtià:ke, or Montreal, has long been a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous, settler, immigrant, and refugee people. On behalf of Concordia, I want to express my respect for the continued connections with the past, present, and future in my ongoing relationships with Indigenous people and nations within the Montreal community and beyond. Today's event is a roundtable whose purpose is to herald the publication of what I think is a groundbreaking book, The Mohawk Warrior Society, a handbook on sovereignty and survival, which is quite literally hot off the press this week, I think, Philippe. And this book, through oral history, art history, and political history, uncovers a hidden story and paints a bold portrait of the spectacular experience of Ganienkehá survival and self-defense. First and foremost, I would like to thank our visitors who join us today, both in person and virtually from Kahnawake. We are very honored to have you with us. And I will now pass la parole to Concordia's Senior Director of Indigenous Directions, Manon Tremblay. Thank you, Manon, for being here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Dan sekakio menon sika sune gua maske kusa kai kanik tu chin nete waskai kanik. So thank you for having me today and welcome everyone. Sego. It's with great pleasure that I welcome all of you today to this very special event. And I am apologizing in advance for reading from my phone. My printer has decided to quit me 5 minutes before this event. I once taught an entire class from my phone because of the same reason. So today we focus on the written and spoken words of the Haudenosaunee peoples. In particular, we're celebrating the many decades of activism, and which continues to this day, even right here in Tiohtià:ke, with the fight of the Ganienkehá Kahnistensera, also known as the Mohawk Mothers, to get McGill University and the Société Québécoise des Infrastructures to investigate the possibility of unmarked graves at the Allen Memorial Hospital, for which they have the support of the independent special interlocutor, Kimberly Murray, and several Inuit groups who lost children after they were sent there in the 1950s. The book we're launching today, the Mohawk Warrior Society, a handbook on sovereignty and survival, is a centerpiece of this special event. It doesn't discuss this most recent struggle, but rather the spirit of activism that has shaped 50 years of Kanien'kehá resistance, art, and organizing. The book launch will be followed by a public roundtable with our invited guests and film screenings of the 1978 film Mohawk Nation and the newly released film Rose, after which there'll be an open discussion. And now I'd like to turn my attention to our special guests. It's my great honor and privilege to welcome these exceptional people, some of whom were not able to join us today, but I will introduce them to you anyway, simply because you will be hearing from them in video form a little bit later in the day. I apologize in advance for mispronouncing your names and also mispronouncing some of the Ganienkeh words. This is not my language. Cree and Ganienkeh could not be any different. It is the same difference as French and Mandarin. So you'll have to forgive me. Even though I've lived on this territory for a long time, I am still learning. I would like to introduce to you first Ateron Yadagon, Francis Boots. Ateron Yadagon is a Ganienkeh knowledge keeper and speaker for the Snipe clan. He's acted as Akwesasne's Ayonwis, keeper of the house since 1974. Ateron Yadagon's deep knowledge of Ganienkeh traditions brings him to travel to various native communities across Turtle Island to teach the language and culture, as well as to officiate Thanksgiving festivals, marriages, and condolences. Ateron Yadagon played a central role in creating the Akwesasne-based Journal of Indigenous Struggles, Akwesasne Notes, before getting involved in the White Roots of Peace initiative, sharing Indigenous traditions across the Americas and beyond. We also have here with us today Gahnawake Rotisken'rhakéhte. Gahnawake is a Ganienkeh from the Bear Clan in Kahnawake. Initially working in the fashion industry, Gahnawake went on to play a key role as speaker and writer in the Indigenous resistance, a role which she has fulfilled consistently for the last 6 decades. During this time, she witnessed and took part in numerous struggles, including the blockade of the Akwesasne border crossing in 1968. It's the year I was born. She has published several books, including Mohawk Warrior 3, The Trial of Lasagna Noriega in 2020. She's been in charge of running the Mohawk Nation News Service since the Oka crisis in 1990. She now cares for her 20 children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Gahnawake means she who is always at the forefront. We have also with us today Philippe Blouin. Philippe writes, translates, and studies political anthropology and philosophy in Tiohtià:ke. His current PhD research at McGill University seeks to understand and share the teachings of the Deyohade, the Turo Wampum, to build decolonial alliances. His work has been published in Liaisons, Status, and Polar. He also wrote an afterword to Georges Sorel's Reflections on Violence and translated several books in French, including Jackie Wang's carceral capitalism, and Sabukoso's radiation and revolution. I would also like to introduce to you Kahnistensera Lauren Thompson. Kahnistensera was born to a Royana father and a Yakoyana mother. He spent his youth traveling between Akwesasne and various construction sites, where he worked as an iron worker on bridges and high-rise buildings for over 40 years. After becoming a council member representing the Bear Clan in 1974, he found himself at the forefront of local resistance efforts directed against the erection of a fence around Akwesasne in 1979. As a result of a Grand Council decision, his house at Raquette Point was designated as the headquarters for that resistance, and his property became the site of an armed siege on the part of local anti-warrior vigilantes and New York State troopers that lasted for over 2 years. In 1990, Kahnistensera was chosen to lead a delegation sent to Kanesatake Mohawk territory as it was being surrounded by the Canadian Army to negotiate a peaceful resolution to the Oka crisis. This is the reason he earned his nickname, Warrior General. I also want to introduce you to the Garondage, Paul Delarond. The Garondage is a Ganienkeh from the Wolf Clan. He was raised speaking his native language by traditional grandparents who had been part of an effort during the 1950s to reestablish an autonomous traditional community in the Mohawk River Valley, his people's original homeland. These childhood experiences helped the Garondage develop the crucial knowledge and understanding of his people's traditional ways, which he inherited from his elders. His profound attachment to Indigenous independence brought him into various confrontations with colonial authorities at an early age. He played a leading role in rekindling the fire of the Rotisken'rhakéhte Mohawk Warrior Society in the early 1970s. Since then, the Garondage has taken part in virtually all the major struggles of the Rotisken'rhakéhte up until the 1990s. Today, he travels throughout Rotisken'rhakéhte territory and beyond, imparting some of the ancestral wisdom that he received directly from his grandparents and elders. The Ganienkeh, his fluency in his native language, is intimate knowledge of the Kanien'kehá and his vast personal experience building Mohawk autonomy in the late 20th century make him an invaluable resource in better comprehending both the history of his people and the uniqueness and depth of their traditional political philosophy and worldview. In my language, the Plains Cree, I would say to all of you, Mstawa, which is our way of saying welcome. It means there's plenty of space. And there is indeed plenty of space for you to share your experiences and your wisdom with us. I also want to extend a warm welcome to all of our Haudenosaunee and Onkwehonwe guests who are joining us today, as well as all of you Concordians and members of the public. I'm certain that this will be a very interesting afternoon. Finally, I also want to acknowledge Concordia's Center for Oral History and Digital Storytelling and the Department of Art History for organizing this event, as well as the Faculty of Fine Arts and the Office of Research for supporting it. Thank you all for coming. I'll now turn it back to the organizers.
Thank you so much, Manon. And you've actually covered everything I was going to say in terms of acknowledgements, so merci beaucoup. So yeah, welcome to the students who are here from 2 classes of mine and 1 class of Dr. Alice Mingwei Jim, who's here. Thank you so much for being here in person. This is a book launch. The books have been hidden like the emperor behind the curtain on the other side of the screen. So you can, at any time today, there's somebody waiting there. You can go and purchase a copy. You can wait until we're taking a break, but feel free also to, we know that everyone has tight schedules. You're welcome to come and go. Don't feel bad if you have to leave. We know that students have other classes. We do hope you can stay as long as possible, however. And just anyone who's speaking, and this goes for the whole room, including our honorable our guests, just to make sure you are speaking into the microphone so that the people who are joining us virtually can hear you. So now it's my pleasure to turn things over to my co-pilot for this event. Just a couple other quick acknowledgements. I did also want to thank Jason Levy, Isha Levy, and Olivia Vidmar for being miraculous, as always, with their help today. But I do want to turn things over now to my co-pilot for organizing this event, Philippe Blouin. Manon already introduced Philippe, and I only met Philippe about, I think, 6 months ago, but I've quickly come to understand how central he is to the book that we are launching today, and what a friend he is to the Kanien'kehá Nation. So as that close friend, he's really going to be taking over now and being kind of the pilot for everyone's experience during this afternoon. Thank you very much, Philippe, for all your help with organizing this and many other events on behalf of the Ganienkeh.
Yawango, Cynthia, and Manon. Thank you everyone for being there, and thank you for Space for welcoming us here. We're very excited to start a discussion and share this reality. This book, it's taken 6 years at least to write, and well, unfortunately today, as Manon said, some of the elders who took part in the book could not be present. Actually, they caught COVID, so we wish them well. We hope they'll be fine. Ganasaranga and the Garundege and Aterunyatagon, 3 elders were very central in the book, which is really organized around their testimonies and oral history of how the Rotisken'rhakéhte, the Mohawk Warrior Society, came to be. So we'll have to improvise this event a bit with those people in absence, but that's how we also did the book. It was quite a lot of improvisation, and we didn't have any roadmap to organize this. And actually, I could say from my own personal experience working with Kanien'kehá traditional people who follow the Gayenregoa, the Great Peace, that I come to understand more and more than that the Gayenregoa is itself a question or a matter of learning methods of how to improvise in life in a certain sense, or methods for discussion, for talking in peaceful ways, and of finding solutions together. So I also wanted to introduce other guests that added themselves here that we weren't expecting at first. There's Matt Peterson, just here at my left, who's an organizer at the Woodbine space in New York City, and also worked on the movie The Native and the Refugee. And there's also Malik Razamni, who's on live stream, I think, so he'll be able to say a few words later on. There you go, Malik. And Malik also worked on the movie Native and the Refugee, and I think he's in Beirut right now. Are you, Malik?
Yes, I'm in Beirut.
Okay, welcome.
The
Great.
internet might be shaky. We'll try our best over here.
Sounds good. Okay, and we also have, well, actually, the only representative of the Rotisken'rhakéhte, the men's fire that we have here is Garunyate, just at my right here, who'll be saying a few words. We have Gwetdio from Kahnawake. Very happy to have Gwetdio from the Kahnistensera, the Mohawk mothers. Gantineda, who's already been introduced, and Garenata also, who did the opening words. And we'll also, a bit later on, there's Jackie Hall, who is Louis Hall's niece, actually, who's heading for Tiohtià:ke right now, and she'll be joining us around noon. Also, yeah, when we say Tiohtià:ke, I'm thinking because if someone like the Garundege would have been here, I think he would have stated that, you know, we're used to doing these land acknowledgements, Tiohtià:ke being unceded territory, but actually Tiohtià:ke is a shortened version of a longer word, which is Junijunjage. And Junijunjage means the place where the people broke up. So when we say that it's a gathering place, well, that's absolutely accurate. It's between the Anishinaabe territories in the north and the Iroquoian territories of the south that we're standing here. And like many islands, Junijunjage used to be a place where people would meet, and there would be exchanges between these different peoples and languages as different as Mandarin and French between Anishinaabe peoples and Iroquoian peoples. But it's something that is quite important, I think, also in this book, how the Ganienkeh language, Untitled Indigenous language, we cannot translate directly into European language what everything that it conveys. And when we consider Jojage as if it was like the proper name of Montreal, what used to be the exact name, well, actually, that's not exactly it, because what it says is that is the place where the people broke up. So it used to be a gathering place, and the people broke up because they couldn't gather here anymore, because the island had been settled by settlers. So it's also this larger view of what language, how it's a relational reality in Ganienkeh tradition. But I think I won't say more for the moment. I think I'll just introduce our first guest here, Kahnistensera, Rotisken'rhakéhte, so Bear Clan on Kahnawake. I'll say a few words.
Sego, I'm glad to see you all here. And I want to tell, I don't know if you have a chance to read it, or some of the people I've met have already read it, and the French version of it. And we have had some astounding responses, because they never knew who we really are and didn't know anything about us. They didn't know about our history, our knowledge of ourselves, where we're from, that we've been here since time immemorial, that we've been, moving throughout the eastern part of Turtle Island, and that we were the protectors of Turtle Island, and we were dropped into the northeastern section to help to take care of the land and the people and the water, because people were starting to come over, or we predicted, I guess the Ganuida predicted that these people were going to be coming over here, and so we were getting ready for that. And the Mohawks were the ones that first joined the Confederacy, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. So just to give you a little bit of a background of who we are, where we're from, and actually we're unique, just like all of our people throughout Turtle Island. And we all knew each other. We visited each other. People came here. They knew this area. And we all did know how to communicate with each other. Sometimes it was sign language, or they learned Mohawk, or we learned their language. But we all knew of each other, right from the North Pole to the South Pole, and from ocean to ocean, we knew of each other. So in our own history, we even selected some songs and some rituals, and we gave a lot of stories which we exchanged with each other. So and the men, of course, played a vital role. So we're going to talk here about our Rotisken'rhakéhte, because they are very important to our history, and to what has happened, and to protecting us and looking after the children. We all tried so hard to survive what has happened to us, the genocide which took place, and of which there are not that many of us left. We're still here, though, and we still have our responsibilities, because the Kanien'kehá, the Great Peace, outlines what we're supposed to do, and we're still doing it because that's why we're here. We're placed here by creation. We are part of creation, and so we have to continue to carry out our duties, especially to the land and to the babies, unborn babies, because they own the land. And that's what makes it unique, is that we don't own this. We are the caretakers, and we're helping keep it as nice as we can. It was almost a paradise when these people, the invaders, came here. They saw a paradise, and I guess then they started making plans, and then so our men had to become, as they were the helping the women as the caretakers, taking care of the woods, taking care of the water, taking care of the relationships with all of the other Okwahunwe. Well, they had to turn towards becoming a little bit more aggressive, and sometimes very aggressive. But we needed these men who had those duties and responsibilities. So Louis came along, probably in a line of our own men that have come to us, and he was a very great person, a visionary for us, and he wanted so much to remind us of who we are and the things that we had to do in order to survive. And so he spent his life, he dedicated his entire life to bringing that back to us, because there was so much work done by the invaders to take everything away from us, take away our language, take away our lands, take our children away, take our history, our culture, anything that they could lay their hands on, they took it away from us. And in some cases, they were successful, and there are many of our people who have become very much like the visitors who are here, and they don't know that much about our history, but there are some of us that continued to carry it on. We still were raised, and we're dedicating ourselves to it. We always did, and so we know quite a bit, and we are the original people. We're the ones that never left the circle of the family, because we are 49 families. That is what the Rotisken'rhakéhte are, the 49 families. And so we continued and continued, but it was very, very hard for us. And Ganienkeh saw it, and he was a great scholar. And of course, he did it by himself on his own. And he raised so much of the history to young people like myself. I was young at the time, and we'd go spend time with him, and he would explain a lot of things, and he would tell stories, and he was a very funny guy too. He had a terrific sense of humor, and but he told us the history, the true history. It was so opposite to what we were being taught in school, and of course we were being taught a history that we were not allowed to. And I remember being in school in Lachine, and I was sitting next to somebody from Kahnawake, and she would get up and she'd say, "You know what you just said about us is all a lie." Well, we got into a lot of trouble, and I sat next to her, and she would get up and she would explain it. But of course, none of that was taught. We were not allowed to teach any of that, and we were all from the Longhouse. We were traditional people who were raised as Longhouse people. That's what they called us in Kahnawake. And it was very difficult for us, and especially for Ganienkeh, but he helped us to get through that. And it was, I have to say that for myself, that he became a mentor to me, and a mentor to a lot of young people, to the young men, and tried really, really hard to do beautiful paintings. Wonderful. He's a wonderful artist, and he did that. And he would stay in his own house. He was a butcher. He did all kinds of things to make some money, and to keep on working and working and working. with this vision that he had, and it was very hard for him because of the way the the government and the church and the agent and the police tried to turn everybody against him. So it was very hard for him. He suffered a lot from that, and he just wouldn't back down. He was he just wanted to show us something, that you don't back down. And so we saw that he dedicated his life. So it ended up that that's what he put into us. And so here we are. Some are several generations after all that time that he had been put in different places, and of course the stories that went on about him it was pretty vicious. But then he got through all that, and now we see how he did it, and it was all with the mind. It was all in the mind. And he said, that's how you have to do it. You have to really, really understand. That was the basis of everything. We have to understand. And so he told us what to know, the things that we should be looking for. And in my case, he saw that a lot of people weren't going to sit down and write any of these stories that were handed down to us. And he encouraged me to do it. And I was very young. I was in my teens. So I started writing stories, and I tried to, pass it around, but people weren't even reading, But what I did was I used to send these stories into the Montreal Star and the Gazette, and sometimes they would publish them. But they didn't know that Kahnistensera was a female. And when they found out it was, they thought it was a guy, and they found out it was a female, then they didn't publish them anymore. So that was the end of that. So I had to find other ways to get our statements out, our mission, who we are, our history. I had to find other ways to do it. And so here I am, many, many generations later, and I'm still trying to do it. I'm still having a lot of difficulty getting the stories out. Because we weren't being listened to, we weren't being heard, we started this Mohawk Nation News, and now that's been going on since 1990. And we just continued it because there are people all over the world that are very interested in who we are and the role that we are playing, because we've been placed here by creation. And we've had to fight the kind of really horrible stories that have been made about us, that we are violent and we are, cannibals and all that sort of thing. And yet the Kanien'kehá means the great peace. That is what we're here for, is we have the tools for peace all over the world. And we know how to do it. And the Ganienkeh, this was in 2015, I wrote a letter to McGill, and I said, I seized it. I seized McGill myself. And anyway, after that happened, we were invited to McGill to teach people about the consensual decision-making process that comes from our culture. And we taught it to people, and they thought it was the greatest thing ever. And they said, this should be for the world. And we said, it is for the world. It wasn't just for us. And so we are still on that same, I'll call it a mission, to teach the great peace to the world. And we'll do it. We will do it. Eventually it will happen, because nobody else has a better, they haven't found anything better than that yet. And this is the one. So that's what we want to do. And anyway, I don't want to take up everybody's time, but I would like somebody else to talk now. And thank you so much for listening. Okay, easy to know.
Yeah, well, I think I can just maybe, when we're speaking, there's even those who have the book here, there's some tools in there. It's really like some kind of a toolbox or a handbook really for figuring these things out. But some of the terms, like when Gantineta talked about the unborn children, unborn children that are the ones who own the land, well, it's actually the word here is tahati kun sun tunje. Yeah, yeah. If you want to have the correct pronunciation, you can check on PM Press or Édition de la Rue d'Orion. There's Gantineta's daughter, Ganienkeh O'Horn, read all the words in Mohawk language in the book to give the accurate pronunciation. And she's an actress. And so that word means the children yet to come, who will come forward to become the future generations. It literally means those whose faces are still in the ground, as they still dwell within Mother Earth. The babies are considered to be the true owners of the land, whose caretakers are the Kahnistensera, the women life givers. I'll pass it on to Guedio.
Okay, to follow, Sergo, my name is Guedio. I guess to follow what Philip was saying about the unborn children or the children to come, that's instilled in the way we live. And if you look at everything like that, anything that you do, you want to leave for your children something better. So our duty as Kahnistensera, and also Kahnistensera, is not a group. I'm Kahnistensera, she's Kahnistensera. She's all on our own, all on our own. It makes us more a wealth of knowledge if we're together, but the Kahnistensera have this duty to take care of the future for our children. And that's the best way we know how, is to make sure the land and the world is a better place. Now, if every corporation or person or family or whatnot looked to the future like that and conducted themselves that way, then we wouldn't be having the problems that we have right now. So that being said, there's so much work to be done as Kahnistensera. There's so much work to be done as Ungwehungwe people. And I think this book is precisely that, a toolbox full of tools for people to understand where Ungwehungwe people are coming from and the way we conduct ourselves. Kanien'kehá is this natural way that was given to us. It's made up of concepts of common sense and problem-solving devices or manners which we take care of problems, or not just problems, ways to conduct ourselves that's more in the way of life, which is continuous, and we want it to be harmonious. So therefore, Kanien'kehá gives us that. It gives us the tools. I mean, Kanien'kehá is such a mechanism that other civilizations have tried to mimic this way. And they've kind of botched it up a little bit, but because they had the understanding that it cares for each individual person and every person matters. It doesn't just have to do with a group, or everyone should be in an understanding of that there's always a solution, there's always a better way. So I think that this book, I'm thankful to Philip for doing all this work on this book, because it conveys it in a manner where Louis Hall is very entertaining as well. It takes all of his eloquent words, he puts things in a certain manner that everyone wants to know more and understand. A great storyteller, he was a warrior, he was a person who committed all of his time into the betterment of a people and of a betterment to people. So I really appreciate this, because when Ngwehunwe people try to move themselves forward in this day and age of all the things that have happened to us, even our own people can be discouraged and not understand the full works of what Kanien'kehá can do. And this is even for our own people to understand, because some of our people do not have an understanding of a way to create new relationships with people, with other civilizations, with other peoples. So I don't know where else I could go. But every day when I wake up, every day when I put my feet on the ground, I think, how am I going to survive today? That's not a normal reaction of a person when they get up. You know, people, oh, I'm tired, whatever. But every day I put my feet on the ground and I say, how am I going to survive today? And that's an ongoing thing. Every day I wake up like that. How am I going to make this better for my children? And that's something that was put into me because of all of the things that were taken away from our people. And so every day I have this duty to find a better way. And if we just follow Kanien'kehá, the way we were meant to be, which is about creation, it's a natural way. And who beats nature? After we're long gone, after we've polluted everything, after we've done all the damage, we'll be gone. But this world is still gonna go on. Nature always finds a way. So I'm trying to convey that if we could follow this, we're gonna have a better fight. We're gonna have a better chance at being successful in all our endeavors, endeavors with the environment, with land, with our peoples, with our rights, right across the board. The same Kanien'kehá nature will always find you the answer if you follow what it puts out for you. So to me, this is like a glance into the way we try to conduct ourselves every day. So if I can't thank Philip enough for putting this all together and doing all the work and getting all of these valuable people. Everyone's valuable, but everyone has a different piece of history and knowledge, and he put all of these people together in one book. You know, look, they're sick right now, they have COVID, but they're still here with us in a way. But as you see, time is going on, and it had to be put in a book before we lose that ability to communicate with all these people. So Yama Philip. And what else could we connect to?
Well, maybe to talk about the book, Nyawan for thanking me. Thanks for thanking me.
Yeah.
But really, actually, you know, us editors, and Gantineta also edited a lot, and Matt and Malik. Actually, there's only the introduction to the book that we actually wrote, and it's pretty short. All the rest is just, you know, adding footnotes, explanations, just so that people can understand the writings of Louis Hall, Ganienkeh, and the interviews with all those founding members of the Rotisken'rhakéhte, the Warrior Society, in the 70s. There's all these features. There's the images of Louis Hall with all these paintings, which you know, have never really been shown up to now. This map of place names in Ganienkeh language, and at the end there's an explanation what they mean. There's a timeline of Mohawk warrior history and Mohawk resistance, and this concept glossary especially, which I already read an entry from it before, but I wanted to add another one, and I can try to intersperse all our speeches with those words, because you were talking about the way of nature. And there's this word, sahoyera, which means the way of creation forever, or the direction of reality. Well, actually, it's not or the direction of reality, it's and. You know, it's used in everyday language to refer to nature or to something natural, in the sense that it's part of the order of things. It's the way nature works, or like naturally so. It contains the root oyera, which means direction, which suggests a continuous temporality whereby nature never ceases to become itself. Nature is always going in its own direction of perpetuating itself. Its relation to creation, and here we're talking about creation, can be contrasted with the Christian-influenced term creator, which is sometimes used, which in Mohawk is Sungwayatison, yeah? Saoyera instead refers to creation and nature as a self-generative process that is not directed by a human-like consciousness. It refers to how the sun rises, how the winds blow, and how the plants and animals grow continuously in harmony to ensure the continuity of life.
Can I say something about that?
Sure.
Okay. This is to my understanding, and I always say that, and my cousin gave me those words, to my understanding. Because when you tell something, I'm not telling you this is how it is. I'm telling you something, and you take it and you make it what you want of it, correct? So when we're talking about sa'oyera, it mean and being of natural way, and then we take a look at the word that's commonly used, the word sungwayatdizu. It means he who made, like he made it like it was man-made. And in my understanding, that word is used a lot, even by Ungwehungwe people, but it was of the influence of European religion, like how people refer to God. Often they say he or God, but in Kanien'kehá, there is no one higher. Everyone has the equal opportunity and has equal value. We may have different parts of us that are more valuable than others, but as a human being, we're all equal. She might be a good writer. I might be a good gardener. He might be a good hunter, but we're all equal. So when it comes to the word sungwayatdizu, I don't appreciate that word, because to me, it's something man-made that we're saying was created us. And the way I understand and the way I feel, there is no one person that is that mystical that can pretend to know of something that created us. Like, am I saying this right? Someone that, I can't say that creation is a he, she, and it. I can't pretend to be so higher up than all of you that I know what to call creation, but creation. So I don't appreciate saying the word sungwayatdizu, because it means it's a man who made it, he who made it. It sounds like religion, like a god, like you're believing in something. I mean, people can believe in whatever they want, but for Ungwehunwe, myself as a Ungwehunwe, and I'm only speaking for me, that's my thought, is that if that makes sense.
Well, the way the Kanien'kehá described it, he said that it was made up, man-made beliefs, and in other words, you have to just put aside any questioning you might have, and you have to believe it. And you say, okay, I believe that, but there's no basis for it. There's no reality. Whereas Gariwio actually refers to a perfect reality, which is what nature is. Nature and us as part of nature, because nature owns us and we're part of that. So we're part of this perfect reality. And I remember telling somebody, it was a non-native person, who was asking and asking, this was a while back, and he wanted to know what Gariwio really meant. Even now it's being misused by the people who have become Christians, but calling themselves traditional people. And they are the ones that use, creator and that kind of terminology. And so he said, what does it really mean? Because that's what we do. We sit around and we talk about these things. And it's really, for us, exciting, because you get deeply into understanding who you are, what the world is made of, and how you can help the creation. So when I said to him, well, I translate, I said, well, what it really means is the perfect reality. He said, I have never, ever heard of that. He said, I've studied all these things, and he had also been a lawyer. He says, you know what? He grabbed his hat and his coat. He says, I've got to go for a walk, because it has to go into my mind like it goes into your mind. Yes, it's
There we go.
okay. Sorry about that. So as I said, he got up and he said, I have to go and walk. And he went for a walk, because nobody ever told me anything like that. The perfect reality. That's what I told him, because that's how we saw it. And he says, yes. He says, and nobody has ever said anything like that. So he could see how we could take a look at everything that they came up with, and we could take what they believe, which is a belief, and we could take it apart. Say, no, that's not true. That's not true. I remember one time. So what is the perfect reality? The perfect reality is creation. Creation and the universe. It's the perfect reality, and we're part of that. But I remember being asked one time, you mean you don't believe in God? I said, you're looking at her. That's what I said. I have as much power as the world, as nature. I have as much power as the animals. We all have this power to work together. And so we try to find ways to work with nature. That's what we think about all the time. When we have a problem, we go and sit, in the forest somewhere, and we just sit there and we wait for these answers to come to us that we're, thinking about. So, and we get the answers. We often, and then we talk about it with each other. And that's what the decision-making process is about, is how you don't have to agree with each other, because you have your mind. Everybody has their own mind. Everybody is born with something unique. And so when you have these decision-making programs where we sit together in our clans to try to figure out something, and then sometimes we don't all agree, but we all take the time and we talk about it. We may not agree, but at the end we will say, but we understand. we understand what each person has said as it goes around, you know, the decision-making process. And so anyway, these were all things that Louis explained a lot of these things to me when I was young. And so it never left my mind. It was always there. And so, you know, it was very hard for a lot of people to leave this other system that was out there. Okay, this is it. Just memorize this, memorize that, and then believe everything. That was the way we were told, and we fought it because we saw that that was not the way it was. So now we have a system of learning, of education that depends on that you just accept these things that you don't even understand, but you pray or whatever it is you do, and then you accept it and you say, okay, okay. And then you write an exam and then they give you a mark. Yes, you passed it or you failed, you know. It just didn't make any sense to us. Because I remember one time, I was 13 years old. I was at the school in Lachine, and I was studying shorthand because they were streaming us always into vocational. And so I wrote this exam on shorthand, and I knew I did it perfect because it's not very hard. You just look at the way they, you know, each form, and then, you know, so I wrote the exam, and then I got 99%. So I asked the teacher, her name was Miss Hetherington. She says, why did I get 99% when I got everyone? What was wrong with with my answers? Well, she said, the reason why you got 99% is because nobody's perfect. That's what she told me. But when I wrote that exam, it was perfect, but she couldn't give me 100%. So that bothered me that she did that. It always bothered me. And always question and question and question, because one of the things that you learn when you're young, they say, you know, they push these things in your mind, and you're fighting it all the time, you know, and because we're told you always have to say why. As a small child, you're always supposed to say why. And the next question is, can you prove it? And this angered the teachers a lot. And they're still using that system, because I went to Augusasne when my grandson was kicked out of class and dropped off the track team because he was always asking those questions. So I sat with the teacher and the coach and the principal, and I said, what was it that he did that made you do this to him, punish him like that? And they said, well, he's always asking questions. I said, well, he learned that from us. That's what he's supposed to do. Really? Yes. And then he's supposed to ask you to prove what you've just said to him. He wants to know that. They didn't know that. They knew the way that, well, this is what you're supposed to believe because it's in that book. And it comes out of that book, and you're supposed to write an exam that you've memorized that. Whereas we don't teach it that way. And that all comes from somebody like Ganienkeh saying you've got to question everything. Everything. He says if you do that, you're going to get a good education. That's what he said.
Okay. So when I was in high school, my history teacher used to come in with a history book, and he used to say, okay, this is what we got to learn. Remember all these dates, remember all these things, and this is why this happened and whatever. And then he'd shut it and he'd say, but let's talk about what really happened. Now, not everyone has a history teacher like I had. So my real history teacher is sitting right there. She's my history teacher. She's my history teacher. And along the way, I actually never read Kanien'kehá. I lived it. And my Ista made sure that I lived a certain way and understood things. She taught me how to think. She didn't do everything for me. And she taught me this. She made a good example of herself. And I never had to be reprimanded for something until now that I'm an adult. Now I'm getting reprimanded left, right, and center. But I'm going against a system that doesn't appreciate my way of living, which is the original way on this land that I belong to. The land doesn't belong to me. I belong to this land. I was born here, my mother's mother, my mom, way back. So it comes to me, things should come to me more natural, but it comes to me that there is this Kanien'kehá mapped out in front of us. It's been written 6 times as far as I know. There might be another one. Kanien'kehá was written out, but it wasn't written out for us. It was written out so other peoples would have an understanding of how we conduct ourselves. See, as far as I was told, going back, our way isn't a written way. It's not. It's the way you conduct yourself. And I know it's almost a way of common sense, but we know that common sense isn't so common anymore. And so it's been written out. And now that I'm older, I have the access to utilizing deeper and finer points within it. When you're young, my mother taught me the way to live properly, the way her parents did, and all of the things that this propelled them to, like when they went take back land, when they went reoccupy territories to take them back. It was something that they needed to do. They needed to assert themselves, almost, how could I say, assert their sovereignty. And even that word sovereignty, it's not our word. So it's a I guess it's a critical thing when you talk about sovereignty, because myself, if I think in English, when I say sovereignty, it feels like, well, I'm sovereign of you. I'm not held to your law or your ways. I don't have that in my language. My language doesn't have that. It doesn't have that, right? Am I saying that properly? It doesn't have that ability to push that word on someone, if that makes any sense. But so when we take a look at Kanien'kehá, I feel that people have relabeled it the Great Law, but in actuality, it's not a law. As far as I understand the way my people are, is that we were born free. We were born on this land and we have the freedoms, and nature will take care of it if I don't conduct myself properly, or if I do something that's detrimental to nature some way, I'm gonna be reprimanded. I'm born free, but once you put a law over me, I'm not free anymore. Because if you put a law over me, if I don't follow that law, I'm reprimanded for it. There's a punishment. So myself, when I say I'm sovereign, I don't like using that word, but when I say that I'm sovereign, I don't fall under a law. I just follow my way. And it's mostly by example, I would say. No one's telling you, oh, you got to do Article 2.5 or whatever. It's just a way that you're supposed to conduct yourself in order to live harmonious with your people. So if that kind of...
Well, right now we're grappling with that exact situation because we're in court and with what's happening with Miguel and the unmarked graves. And these are our children, and we must attend to them. We must, because they're part of us, past, present, and future. So we have this duty and responsibility. And we're in court using our own law. And the judge says, yes, the Kahnistensera know their law. They don't need a lawyer. So we don't have a lawyer. We've been fighting that for a year, not to have a lawyer, but to do it ourselves. And so that's how it's worked. So finally we got a decision from from Judge Moore. And that's what we're dealing with right now is, and I think the other side, our opponents are having a very hard time with that, because they go on protocol, you know, it's like a swamp, eh? They try to push us into it. But we continue to always go back to the Ganienkeh because our guidance comes from the Ganienkeh. It's all based on nature. So and we take whatever is there, we interpret it, and then we use it in what we're doing in the court. So far, well, we won already on that instance, which was kind of shocking because now that means all our people throughout Canada can go into court, represent themselves. They're not forced to represent, to get a lawyer, because the lawyer is always comes from the other side and supposed to represent you, but you know that very well, that they're just, you know, pushing the other system and trying to interpret who we are through this other system, and so we've gone in and that's what we've done. We've used our own system and we've interpreted the whole thing ourselves. And we're going into court on the 26th of this month to find out whether we actually have been able to get the injunction to stop what's happening up on Mount Royal. But anyway, one of the places, if you really wanted to know what we're doing, you can go to Mohawk Nation News, go back a year, and it'll give you a real history of all of the things that we've been writing and putting in there, just to get to know and understand us and understand what our thinking is and how it works. And so now this is, I don't know if it's the first time anybody ever did this, but the mothers, that's what we're doing. And you know, we're running into a lot of misunderstanding, and so you know, and also if you want to meet Louis Kahnawake, you can go on Mohawk Nation News, and on the homepage he did one version of the Ganienkeh, and a booklet actually, and that's also on the homepage. And it'll show you the Mohawk version and then the English version. So we made a film, an audio over 30 years ago, and we put it on there. It's always been on there. And so my aunt is the one that does it in Mohawk, and we had a hard time because I find it hard to read Mohawk. I can speak it, but I have a very hard time reading it. But she practiced and she put it out on that video. If you want to take a look at it, and then I read the English translation, and then Kahnawake will give you an explanation of what it is. But you can hear the Mohawk. And Mohawk is a very important language for us because it is, as my aunt said, Garana'a. It's really a Garana'a. Our language is a song. And when you learn, and that song comes from the earth. And when you learn that song from the day you're born, you are going to be hearing this song, and you learn to speak, and you learn to see it. You have to, it's a visual thing. That's another difficult thing for people to understand, is that we have to see it. So I think that I don't know if you understand what I'm talking about here. Is this kind of, it's not easy to talk about it, but the language is almost like it's like a mystery. And when you're sitting around talking with other people, we're pulling this mystery out, out of the air, I guess, or just out of what we're living in here, and we're trying to find answers. And so when we do that, it stirs up our minds, because each one of us has something. We're born with and every one of us is born with something unique, something different. So when we have something that's happening and we need to understand it in a very deep way, then we sit together and each one puts what they know. Even a child will have a knowledge of something, and they will tell you what they say, what they see. And it might be that small little, whatever understanding that child has, may be the very thing that we all are looking for to bring everything together, because that's how it works. And so I don't know if you understand that. You know what I would like? I'd like you to start asking some questions.
Yeah.
Do you find it interesting? What is it about this that you find so interesting?
So I'll help facilitate, but since you brought it up, Kahnistensera, I'm not sure that everybody here does know, in fact, what you are working on in terms of the fight against McGill University and the Royal Victoria Hospital. So I did want to ask you maybe if you could elaborate a bit more about this battle, because it's super important. There's so much dialogue around unmarked graves of Indigenous children who were stolen from their families and their nations. But right here in Montreal, there is a lot of reason to think that there are unmarked graves of Indigenous and Inuit children, at least behind the Allen Memorial Hospital, which was part of the Royal Victoria Hospital, and where some very notorious experiments took place with the sanction of the government and a lot of funding from the CIA. And I know you have important evidence that has led you to ask McGill repeatedly to investigate this presence, and it's ended up in the courts. And this is part of your battle that you were just talking about, the battle to represent yourselves in court, not be represented by an agent of the colonial legal machine. But I'm wondering if, maybe you'd like to speak more about the form that battle has taken, because it's about land, it's about the decision-making, who gets to decide what happens to this land. It shouldn't be McGill, right? But also to connect this to everything that you're sharing with us today about the Ganienkeh, I probably didn't say that very well, the great piece. So that would be my first question, and then maybe other people have questions.
Okay. So this has been a long journey, yes. Last November, we had requested, or we had informed McGill of various findings, and we understood that they were going to conduct a project called the New Vic Project on the grounds of McGill and the old Royal Victoria Hospital. Next to it, there's the Allen Memorial Hospital, and they were doing this new infrastructure, and we weren't consulted about anything. We weren't consulted, and that's the land that belongs to our future generations. And oh my goodness, there's so much. That was a loaded question. Okay.
Okay. She needs to go. Sorry about that. Okay. I think that's an important question, but we're here to talk about Louis. But what we're doing, we've been influenced by Kanien'kehá. Yes, I have to say that, because it's there and it's constant. It's constant. It just plays in our minds, just like she said. You wake up in the middle of the night and you put a note down, and this goes on and on and on and on. It just doesn't stop. And we are all like that. That's the way we are. So now we're at this point, after a whole year, twice now they've tried to force us to take a lawyer to represent us. And we fought it. We said, no, never, we can't allow that. So we fought them the first time around, which was at the federal court. And in the end, we dropped out of there and took it into the Quebec Superior Court. And when we did that, there were so many that joined on to this case. Unbelievable. You had the Royal Vic, you had the Allen Memorial, you had the McGill, you had Stantec, the City of Montreal, and then you had the Quebec government and the Attorney General of Quebec, and then you've got the federal government Attorney General. So now there's us, the women, and they keep thinking that there's only just the three of us doing this, and we don't say anything, because every woman is a Kahnistensera, a Mohawk mother. And we did go to all the other communities and we told them what we were doing, and they agreed that it had to be done, that we had to question the what was happening and what was being done to the unmarked graves and what had happened to our children, because Kahnawake was one of the places that they were taking the children from there, and they were, using them for experiments, and some of our children were taken. It's horrible. I mean, it's just awful. It's hard to talk about it because it's our own family. And I'll just give you an example of some of the children that were, what they did was they came out to Kahnawake and they gave IQ tests, to find out what our IQ was, and then if they saw, oh, these are some smart kids here, then they gave more IQ tests and they found that they were very smart, but then they called them unruly kids, and they told the government, and they told our people, even our they told them, look, these children are having problems because they're unruly. That's because we question, and we do, as I said, we're always, having a hard time. So anyway, what happened was they took these children. Some of them, they got lobotomies, things like that. Some of them they wanted to send to these schools, the residential schools. And I mean, there was just awful things that were done, and there were so many things set up to do it, to carry out. Actually, it was genocide of our children, because of how we feel about our children, that we're going to make sure that they're here and we're going to keep the land because it's theirs. So I guess they thought, well, I don't know, we don't know that, but I'm just saying that happened. And so we lost our children. And of course, we're never going to forget that. It affects us. It always affects us. So I don't know if you want to know more about that, because it's in court right now, and I'm not sure what we can say and what we can't say, because every time we say something, we're getting we're getting attacked. We're being cautious about it. But we've written a lot about it, that what we can, in the Mohawk Nation News. And you can read up yourself and see and learn a bit about what we're up against and how difficult it is for us, and what we're going through. And so we've gone ahead, and we have no money, of course, and but a lot of money, is being used by all of these different institutions and these governmental representatives and so on. And yet, you know, we're still carrying on as best we can. We may not win because it's very difficult. What we're doing is really far out. And we're not going to back off. We're not going to have a lawyer. No, we won that already. And we're going to go ahead. We're going ahead. We want our children. We want them. They're here. They're placed here. We want them. And we want to do what we're supposed to do. We have our own ceremonies for these children, for anybody that leaves and goes on to the, you know, to wherever they go. So we're having, it is very difficult for us, but all we do is we rely on the Ganienkeh. We don't rely on any of those laws that have been brought here over on the ship. And so I don't know whether I said too much or not enough, whatever. What?
Well, like I said, nature always finds a way. So when we follow Ganienkeh, that's our duty. That's the way we're doing it. And that's the only way I am supposed to do it. I can't. Once I submit to another way, then I have, how do you say that? I have canceled out my, yeah, I left the canoe if I go into using someone else's laws to govern myself. So in the end, all I can say about this case is that we're going to continue to do it. It's my duty to do that. And it's a duty to show my children how to assert themselves and how to put one foot in front of the other and keep churning away, because as far as I'm concerned, this genocide is still going on. They put things right in our community to get rid of us, and they're not going to win. We're going to win. That's all. Does anyone have any kind of questions? Anything?
Hi, yeah, thank you so much. I was wondering if, like us as white settlers, if we could do anything to support that court case or any of those efforts. And yeah, I also don't want to take attention away from the book discussion, but.
Many people ask us that. How can we help? And I cannot tell you what to do. You know your strengths, you know your capabilities, and only you know how much you know. By gathering as much information you can and talking to as many people as you can, having you have that knowledge, you will come up with something that you can do, because I cannot tell you what to do. If that makes any sense. Not saying like, no, oh, I don't want to tell you what to do, but that's the most efficient way of doing it, because I know what I have to do, and in order to do it the best, only I can do that. You have your strengths. So,
well, the main thing that is that with all of the problems that have been thrown our way, we just said the only number one thing is those children and what happened to them, those horrific things. We have about 100, almost 150 exhibits that are in the court, and you can go and look at them, and you'll see that there's a lot of proof about what was done to our children. And we're having a hard time getting that, but we're getting them, and we filed them. And the other thing that we are never going to let anybody represent us. We will only represent ourselves, and that's just the way nature intends. You know, when two animals, they don't say, "Oh, well, I'll represent you, I'll get a lawyer." No, they don't do stuff like that. They have to live, so they have it in them, in their minds, and they're going to use their minds, and that's what we're doing. So I don't know how it's going to work out, but that's the only thing that we're going to do. We have to do something for our children and what happened. Our children is us, and they're our children, and this horrific what happened to them. And you know, there's things going on. We can't talk about that right now. You probably know. And but that's the number one is the children. And the number two is we're going to represent ourselves. And we don't, and it doesn't, to us, it's going to end up the way it's going to end up, but we will represent ourselves.
So there is actually a question in the online chat, which you may or may not be able to answer. Oh, and it's disappeared, the one I was going to read out. So here we have something from Sean. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So the question from Naomi is, I would be interested to know, since the Kahnawake Band Council was supposedly consulted and approved the new Vic, what is their relationship to the Band Council generally? I think they maybe means the speakers. If it cannot be answered, I understand completely.
Okay, first of all, the Kahnawake Band Council is an entity of the Canadian government. It's not Ngwehunwe people. And approved the new Vic. As far as I understand, the powers that be in Quebec and where they went further, as far as I'm having understanding, is that these consultations were an afterthought. They were only done last week. New Vic project started, I think, in 2015. That when they start looking into making the project. That's another point. Another point is that according to Heritage Quebec, I think it is, correct me please if I'm wrong, but they don't, as long as they put a letter in the mail and said, this is what we're doing, here you go, as long as they sent that letter and consultation, they don't even need to respond and say yes or no, this band council. And as long as it was consulted, Nuvik has permission under, so I don't know how much heritage that holds up. And the band council doesn't notify the peoples. The peoples in Kahnawake, as I can see, for what I can see in newspapers and online and such, they always do things and they tell the people later. They sign papers and we don't know what's on those papers, and then they tell the community after it's done. So if that answers a question.
Well, in 1924, the Canadian government passed the Indian Lands Act and set it up throughout Canada. They turned our land over to the provincial government. We would not turn anything over. We can't transfer any of our land because it belongs to the children. So they put us all on, well, it was the military that did it, put us all on Indian reservations. And then they started to take our children and putting them into residential schools. And then they had other means of getting our children, scooping them and putting us in these schools, myself, one of them. And so all of these powers, and it was basically a POW camp. That's what reservation is, and it's run by the military. And so even the person that was recently Department of Indian Affairs head, Mark Miller, he was from the military. He was even fighting us in Oka in 1990. He was head of a big platoon over there, and then he became the Minister of Indian Affairs to totally control us. And our money was taken, our lands were taken at that time in 1924, and they put in something that is going to complete the I hate to use that word, but it's genocide, because we're going to be turned into Canadians, I guess, by the stroke of a pen. And anyway, so now that's 2 years from now, and then then Canada will no longer be a corporation. They'll turn it into a I guess a country, because it's not a country. That's what they're, and then Canada is not a country because it doesn't have land, doesn't have our land, it doesn't have a culture, and it doesn't have a language. There's two foreign languages being spoken here, and when we go to court, they speak in French actually, and we don't speak French. We speak Mohawk. However, if you want to understand the way it's set up, that's the way it's set up. And that's basically underlying what we're fighting, is that we need to express ourselves, and we want our own way, the Ganienkeh, to be recognized like it's supposed to be. It's the law of the land. Look at your own laws, like the Constitution Act of 1982, sections 35 and what's the other one? 52, 35 and 52. It certainly makes very clear that it is the law of the land, our law, and our law doesn't recognize any other law. So it's a difficult situation for Canada. And so for you to really understand this, it's very complex. I don't know if you are understanding what I'm saying. Do you, or do you not? Yeah. Pardon? The Canadian Constitution, yeah.
Section 35 of the Constitution in Canada, 1982. You know, they passed it. It's when they brought the Constitution back from Great Britain, and they had not a single word about Indigenous peoples in the first version of that Constitution that they repatriated. So there was a movement, a protest, and everything. So they ended up adding this section which acknowledges and affirms Indigenous customs, traditions, and ways of governance. I don't remember the exact wording. And the section 52 states that all laws that don't conform with the Constitution are null and void. So if you follow the logic of it, section 35 says that Indigenous customs are sovereign. So they recognize the Ganienkeh, but the Ganienkeh does not recognize Canada. So the only one that's valid is the Ganienkeh. So that's the logic of it. And that cannot be suspended. The notwithstanding clause doesn't apply to section 35 of the Constitution. So that's some kind of trick inside the Constitution. But the courts have repeatedly refused to make judgments that pertain to those sections. So it's some kind of loophole, or it's a gray zone still. I saw Sean Sager, who says, I don't want to be respectful to the speakers, but could we speak or hear of the book itself? My interest in this is that I've been a member of the Warrior Society since 1974. I'm from Kanien'kehá, Mohawk territory. Well, sure. I don't know, Sean, if you would want to speak as well. It would be possible if you have your camera. Just let us know. But we can try to come back to the book. And we also have other guests here whom we'd like to let them speak before taking maybe a small break in half an hour-ish, have a bite, something to eat, and then we'd come back with the videos of the guests who couldn't be present, and more of a Q&A and open discussion afterwards. There's Jackie Hall, who's the niece of Louis Hall, Ganienkeh, who just arrived, but I think it's not the right moment, right, to speak. She's breastfeeding. So I might pass it to, on the book itself, Matt Peterson, who came here from New York City, was also an editor of the book, so we can talk more about the details of technically how this all happened. You know, the book is really centered, and it's Louis Hall, Ganienkeh, who's credited as the author of the book because it includes the Warrior's Handbook and Rebuilding the Iroquois Confederacy, as well as the Ganienkeh Manifesto. So some of his most important texts. The Warrior's Handbook was really, well, many, you know, Haudenosaunee, Iroquois warriors, or everyone knows Louis Hall, I think, and many have read already the Warrior's Handbook, but more in, you know, self-printed ways and small pamphlets and stuff like that. So this is the first time that it's in bookstores and it's shown to a wider public. So the intention of this book is really like to give some kind of editorial apparatus and a toolbox to allow to understand what he's saying, some terms and all the reality that it's coming from and all the events that were happening. So it's mainly based on his text. And there's also interviews with three important figures of the first moments of the Warrior Society, especially in Kahnawake and Akwesasne at the end of the 60s, beginning of the 17s. And then there's all these editorial materials, the history timeline to give an idea, the glossary, the map. So that's all to allow non-Indigenous people or Indigenous anyone to understand what this is about. So I'll pass the mic to Matt, maybe to say a few words.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for inviting me and for everyone coming and being here. I'm Matt Peterson. I'm from New York City. I'm an artist and a documentarian there. And along with Malik Rasamni, who I think is joining us online, in 2014, we started a documentary project called The Native and the Refugee, which was a juxtaposition between American Indian reservations in the United States and Palestinian refugee camps in the Middle East. And as part of that documentary, we started to think about the Mohawk resistance that was happening in New York State, both in Ganienkeh, which was a Mohawk territory that was reclaimed in the early 70s, which still exists, that is sort of outside of the reservation system in the US that exists in a kind of legal loophole, which was, of course, very interesting for us. And then there's Akwesasne, which is a reservation in upstate New York that actually spans the border into Ontario and Canada. So it kind of exists within 3 different jurisdictions. And of course, there's a river. So there's a lot of possibility and activities that happen there. And, you know, we were, of course, interested in the Mohawk Warrior Society, which was, you know, most spectacularly known in the 1990 Oka crisis and the kind of armed struggle resistance that happened, I guess, not too far from where we are. But so in 2014, we started to visit Akwesasne and Ganienkeh to meet with people and to kind of have these conversations. And at first, I guess I just want to acknowledge some of the people that started to invite us up that are no longer with us. So that's James and Mitch Gray, Art Montour, Harriet Boots, Junior David, some of which are contributors in the book. But since we started, you know, 8 years ago, have passed away. And I just want to acknowledge all of their contributions, both to this history, but specifically in kind of inviting us up and including us and being welcoming, inviting us into their homes, you know, eating with us, telling us about their lives and memories and histories. But, you know, as we were working on our project, which was primarily a film project, you know, documentary film and a series of videos, we were filming these conversations and interviews at the Longhouse and around. And there was just so much material and so much content. And then, you know, with Phil, we started to think, you know, we have to find a different output for this material. You know, not all of it is going to be visible or, you know, includable in our documentaries. So that's where, you know, the oral histories that are in the book, some of them come from that process, you know, from some of the original documentary interviews we were doing for our films and then wanting to expand them. But, you know, as we've been seeing already here the last hour or so, you know, as we were doing the interviews, it's not a traditional kind of conversation as certain journalists might be used to. You know, you try to ask a specific question and it goes to the great law, it goes to the concept, it goes to the language, because even when you try to think specifically about some discrete thing, like, the construction project that they're opposing now, or, the Oka crisis, they say, well, really why we're doing that is because of the Great Law, because of, what our language tells us, or because of the ways in we relate to creation. So for us to do this documentary, we really had to dig deep into the research, across centuries or millennia of certain kind of ways of thinking and ways of relating to the world. It wasn't, a discrete news thing that we could do and get a 25-second soundbite and kind of plug that into a video and then think that that explains, what's happening, or how to really understand what happened in 1990, or how to really understand what happened in 1974 in Ganienkeh, led us necessarily to kind of work on the research that went into this book. I also just want to talk about something, another impulse aside from, the research Malik and I were doing for our documentary. Another impulse, I think, was all of our participation, including Phil, in kind of radical militant movements in Montreal or New York or throughout the US and Canada, to think about, specifically what Kahnistensera was saying, or what everyone's been saying about, I think for, if you want to, settlers or whatever who want to see themselves as revolutionary in Canada or the United States, who want to think about transformation and feel a certain critique or anger or rage about how the world is organized, but do not have this kind of tradition like the Mohawks have to draw from. They don't have this sort of this legacy of kind of a different relationship with the land and territory because of these waves of settler colonialism and immigration. How do we then imagine a revolutionary transformation on this continent or on North America? And I think for us, that was also part of the solidarity in wanting to do this research about the Mohawk Warrior Society, who in very recent history, the last 30, 40, 50 years have been engaged, in armed struggle against the Canadian government and against the United States government, to think about what was sort of inspiring, or what kind of, how did they organize themselves and what animated that form of resistance. I think that was also a part of what we wanted to research and document, both in the films that Malik and I were making, but also here in this book, to think about what was that history, who were those actors and protagonists, what was the kind of philosophy or cosmology kind of inspiring that kind of activity and that kind of resistance and organization, and then who was this Mohawk Warrior Society, which I think has been, intentionally opaque for certain kinds of, Western knowledge or history or documentation. So, again, just to acknowledge all the people that were very generous and welcoming for all of us to kind of be invited into these longhouses at Awasasne and Kahnawake to kind of to talk to us and meet with us and think with us and kind of share their stories and memories. And this book is just our attempt to kind of document as much as we could, again, as we've all been saying, as we understood it, as much as we could understand, to kind of assemble and document. And I think as researchers or as documentarians, whenever you get interested in a kind of history or a story or subject, this book is just what we hoped we could find when we first started, all the questions that we had, 6 years ago or 8 years ago when we started, everything we wanted to know, everything we wanted to read, all the people we wanted to meet with and talk to. We just wanted to produce that into a book or into the films that Malik and I made. So for people subsequently who couldn't meet these people, and a lot of them have already passed away, and obviously with COVID, there's increased risk of these generations kind of not being able to encounter and engage each other. So I think the timing of this, the Mohawk Warrior Society being kind of revived in a certain way in 68, 69, in the early 70s, that's quite a long time, so there was also this sense that we had to do this soon, now, and try to get as many of these conversations recorded as we could and kind of share them. And, now I think we have an opportunity while people are still alive to kind of have these encounters and engagements, to think about not just their history from the 70s and 80s, but how obviously it continues now with these struggles that are happening, but also how it might apply to the rest of the continent. This book obviously has a specific meaning and relevance here in Montreal, but I'm from New York City, and other people across the US and Canada and the whole world, really, to deal with some of these questions, for a book, for us to assemble this in a book and publish it with a kind of a publisher that can kind of circulate, thousands of copies around the continent. The hope was that this book could really have an impact for different people around the country and around the world to really think about this lesson of kind of resistance that the Mohawk Warrior Society embodied and participated in. Another just kind of thing I want to talk about, in 2016, I came up because there was the World Social Forum here in Montreal, and at that time there was a number of Kurdish organizers and activists, and Kanien'kehá invited us all to her home in Kahnawake. I remember there was this interesting encounter between, Kurdish, radicals and militants and, elements of the Mohawk Warrior Society at her home. But I think, Malik and I also visited, as part of our work, Kurdish regions in Syria and Iraq and Turkey. And I think in both cases, a kind of indigenous people engaged in armed struggle, kind of defending a sovereignty that states don't want to recognize or exist. Typically, you would think, they would want to, but both the Kurds and the Mohawks never want to talk about the kind of the violence or the kind of the self-defense. They want to talk about their language. They want to talk about their culture. They want to talk about the history. They want to talk about certain terms and what they mean to them. And I think that was really interesting, again, coming from a kind of an American, urban New York kind of radical mentality. We don't have that kind of way of thinking and talking. We kind of talk in a more direct, have to think about resistance and kind of opposition in a very different way. And I think this kind of book or project was a way for us to open ourselves up to think differently about what resistance or what survival might look like or mean in the coming decades or generations. So yeah, that's just some of the things I wanted to talk about and think about my experience and my kind of perspective or relation to the book. But I'm just really grateful to be here and to have been invited and included to participate in this research project, to produce this book and produce this kind of possibility of solidarity and exchange between New York and Montreal and these sort of Mohawk territories around here, and think about, for me, the question to think about why we made the book and why we published it in a kind of a larger way is to think about what impact could it have throughout, the English-speaking world or throughout the United States and Canada. Obviously here there's these acute conflicts that continue to happen in Montreal, and it's so present, but part of the book is to kind of extend beyond that and to think about, how we can really imagine resistance to the settler colonial states of the US and Canada, in a deeper, longer way that kind of apply throughout the continent, really. So that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thanks. I'd like Malik to talk too, but maybe first we'll let Jackie say something, because the baby is calm right now and Katinette's got it, so we'll take advantage of this moment. But I also see there's a question from Wageniato asking if there's any research on the Akwesasne conflict in 1989-1990 in the book. Yes, it is present, especially through the stories that are told by Ganesaragan, who whose own house was like the headquarters of what was going on at the conflicts around the casino back then. That was also important in shaping 1990. So yes, it's definitely present. Okay, Jackie.
Sego Gayati Dake, also known as Jackie Hall. I'm from Akwesasne. I was asked last week to attend this event. I was made aware there was a book being made, but I wasn't exactly sure what it was. So I'm pretty happy about this right now. I'm not sure what I missed in the conversation before I showed up, but I can just tell you where I came from. I came from a camp where we've been occupying land for over 2 years in so-called Dundee, Quebec, because the Band Council in Akwesasne made a deal with Canada that they were going to get $42 million if they agreed that the surrender was valid when we never surrendered our land in the first place. So a lot of settlers and leasees out there forgot that we never surrendered our land, and they believe they own it. So that's one thing as a settler Canadian, you can try not to work against us and educate yourself on where you live and whose land it belonged to. Because for about a whole year, we were harassed by the people around here because they seen us as a threat. Me and my 5 children where I've been teaching them land-based teachings off the land and getting our language back while being on the land. And it also has the border that he spoke of in Akwesasne. So I'm in court right now representing myself, fighting border charges because we don't report to their Canadian customs. They're considering us immigrants on our own land. So they fly helicopters and harass us, and they see myself and my young children as a threat to their agenda, the colonial agenda, because we made a legal uncertainty by occupying the land that the Band Council said they were going to take the money and we weren't going to try to take that land back and fight for it. And it also extends into the Seaway claim, which reaches across all these territories in Kahnawake, Akwesasne, going down to St. Lawrence. The Seaway Corporation is right now attempting to expand and take more of our land and flood it out and dredge the rivers and recontaminate our waters. And that's another issue that hasn't arisen yet because of the occupation in Dundee. So there's a lot of things going on in the different territories. And the only reason I'm doing this and I've held my ground for so long is because I was raised in a family like Louis Hall's my great uncle, Gagwila Gale, Art Montour is my grandfather. My father was in Moss Lake when he was about 8 years old when they occupied that land. So it's like generations now, and it's something that's instilled in us, and we can't just walk away from it. So I think I'll hand the mic over. I just wanted to introduce myself.
Yeah, well, lots of struggles going on. It's ongoing. Malik, do you want to say a few words before we break out for a small break? Just eat a bit.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I want to echo a lot of what Matt was saying. He said a lot of the things that I wanted to say. The only things I would add was that for us, I mean, I think it was interesting to focus on Akwesasne and then through Akwesasne, the Mohawk Warrior Society, because of the emphasis on on the specificity of their struggle for sovereignty, what we would call sovereignty. I agree, it's a poor word, but because when you look at a lot of Native movements, a lot of them are pan-Native movements, which is obviously interesting. But we all know that the category of Native is a colonial category because each tribe or grouping has their own language and their own specific nature to the land and their own way of imagining the world and their own forms of governance. So the rootedness of the Mohawk Warrior Society in Iroquois or Haudenosaunee ways of life and ways of imagining the world was extremely interesting to us, and I think very important. Another thing that was interesting is I don't think it's just a question of purely resistance, of opposing colonial frameworks. Actually, what was so amazing and what we tried to capture in the book with the interviews that we did and with reprinting Louis Hall's writings and with the work that we did on the glossary and in defining Mohawk terminology, was that it's actually offering a kind of something affirmative, a kind of something that is not just about countering the settler colonial concepts and settler colonial forms of government, but actually offering alternatives and alternatives that have been there, that are just being reimagined now, but have actually always existed and aren't even being created, that are present not only in Mohawk culture, but in a way somehow in the land itself or in nature itself. So all of that was very interesting, and I think tremendously the ideas about language is something that I really learned through my work in many different reservations and many different Native communities, is the idea of how important understanding their language is in terms of understanding the political concepts. So I think that the work that we did on the glossary, especially Phil and Kahnistensera, I think is tremendous, because it really allows people to unpack these things. And I mean, when we speak, there's always what words that we take for granted are always oftentimes unturned. So it's, for example, it's not that the Mohawk people are a nation, actually, it's that they're a people, and that there's a distinct difference between a people and a nation, and that the term sovereignty is just what we would call their way of life in the face of colonialism, but that it's much bigger than the word sovereignty. The word sovereignty only makes sense in terms of its relationship to another power force. Even the word of people, even the word of Mohawk or these things like that, it's not how we would imagine it in English. And so when you understand the way, even the word rain, that it's something like a blessing that comes, as opposed to just simply the word rain. So for me, one of the most interesting things was the etymology and how when you understand how the words are said and what they mean, it completely reformulates and reframes the way of thinking without having to write a big philosophical tract or go into tons of philosophical discourses and ideology. Just merely understanding the language unpacks a whole world of different concepts and different ways of relating to each other, what we would call in the West political philosophy, but something I think that means a lot, is a bit restrictive when speaking about the ideas that we would find in this book. So those were some of the inspiring things for me personally working in this project that we could take forward, and some of the things that we hoped to try for in the book and that we can keep trying to do is to not just talk about what happened in the history and get into a different point of view on what happened, but also to understand the worldview and the language that animates that way of life and that animated those political conflicts and those political movements. So I was happy to hopefully be a part of transmitting that knowledge for a new audience and in a new time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
As you were saying, the words, just like the word reconciliation, or it's like saying, I'm sorry. I don't care how many times you say, I'm sorry. That word does not mean anything. It's actions.
Yeah, I don't remember what it is again here, but yeah, there's this word, instead of saying, I'm sorry, there's no word for apologies, right? In Mohawk language, you can only say, I will make it right. And the word that Malik was mentioning for rain also, I remember Digarundege always tell this story in different ways, but he says in English, when you say, oh, it's gonna rain, well, people are like, oh, I gotta, take cover, and there goes my hairdo, there goes my, but in Mohawk, Yagonoru means you can see that it's precious. You can see that it's precious, that it's gonna replenish all the streams, and it's gonna, allow life to continue. So that's really in the internal logic of the language that, I barely, I can barely speak Mohawk at all, but it was spending lots of time with Digarundege and with others so they could give a full explanation of all the connotations, that all those sounds, what they evoke as images. And it's something that Kanien'kehá told me, and maybe you can talk a bit more about it, but how the language, when you try to break it down and to see what it means, that it brings images up, but the moment where you understand what it really means is when the images start moving, and it's like a moving picture, or something that is close to life, life as some kind of moving picture. So you can really see it. Digarundege says it's like even having a projector, a screen in your own mind when you see what those words mean. So I know maybe we ought to take a little break, maybe like half an hour before coming back, and we can check the videos of the elders who couldn't be here, of those three. I call them the power trio, Ateruniatago, Ganasaraga, and Digarundege, who, they're always traveling, doing condolences and all those ceremonies, and they speak the old words. So we'll see some videos from them. Welcome back to second part of this event, where we are going to hear the guests who could not make it, Ateruniatago, Ganasaraga, and Digarundege, who are three very important figures in rekindling the fire of the Rotisken'rhakéhte at the end of the 60s and 70s, and were still some of the few knowledge keepers who keep a knowledge of the meaning of the old words.
So we'll be hearing them, videos that come from the book launch that was done, was it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, at the Atomic Cafe in Hochelaga for the French version of the book at Rue d'Orion. And so it's, unfortunately, they couldn't make it here, but I think they agree with what they said back then 3 weeks ago. So we'll put those videos, and then we can have more of a casual discussion, Q&A, and discuss perhaps also current issues and current struggles. So that's it. Let's run the videos.
Negati wahene, tukara di gawana ke. Le wahene yutsununya. Nene, okoe ko wa kakoe ni kan tu ko tu ya taroro ke homa yukara serate. Le wahene yukwa yutake. O na ya wane ustung hasaha ta yukwa ni ko raya da le china te doa te. Negati tu wa ko no huera so a My name is Kanien'kehá. I come from the Mohawk community in Akwesasne. It's near Cornwall, Ontario. I grew up there. I come from a large family, and my parents dedicated our traditional ways to us, taught us what my brother was explaining. I'm just really happy to be here tonight. You know, it was a challenge getting here. This city of Montreal, I don't know how you people can get. We took so many wrong turns. We even crossed this great big bridge. We were on the other side of Montreal before we realized where we went. But I'm glad we're here. Kanien'kehá, Louis Hall. I met him when I was already an adult in the Longhouse. And I'm telling you, a man of peace, a man of integrity, a man of calm, an amazing, powerful person, the ability to listen. Kanien'kehá was a good listener. And when it was his turn to say a few things, he said it directly. I want to tell you, our language has gone through a very rough time. Some of us are fortunate enough to have grown up in the language right from birth. That's our first language. Many of our adolescent children don't have that, but they're trying their best. They're going back. They're learning. Kanien'kehá had this amazing vocabulary. I'm telling you, in the language also, because of our tradition, because of our ways, the vocabulary of our ceremonies, our traditions, our meetings is very different than the everyday vocabulary that we speak to one another in the community. So it's very difficult. Our young people are struggling to get a handle on that. Ya te ka wana ke wantore ne aho di ni ko rayonta o wanagayo, older terms from the beginning of creation, from beginning of the peacemaker. These terminologies, you don't hear them on the street. You just, and I want to say to you, for about 30 years now, our children have been taught in a white man's school about our language. And I personally have a problem, because when they read and write in Kanien'kehá, it doesn't come from their heart, it comes from their brain. And they're missing out on the true meaning of our language. But they're trying their best. There was a time in my life, my friends, where I thought our language is not going to survive. I really believed one time that it's just going to go away with my generation. Well, I don't believe that anymore. It's not true. The young children are hungry, they're eager, they want to learn. And that was the beauty of Kanien'kehá. He spoke the quiet love. He spoke the firm commitment. He explained things in a way where there was no question about what his intentions were. And sometimes I used to sit and listen with him. We'd sit there, and him and I would be listening to the men leaders and the women leaders, Kahnistensera. And he just had this patience about it, you know. And a lot of times he would be called upon to do the speaking, but he kind of like sat quietly and listened. I really learned a lot from that. He did a lot of good things. Kanien'kehá was a powerful example of what is it we need to do to retain our territory, to retain our governance, to retain our sovereignty. He was the one that you could go to, for example. He can show it to you, tell you. His books, there's several of them. He worked with other people to try to accurately write our Kahnistensera. In English it says the great law of peace. I personally call it the great way of being nice. Kanien'kehá and others, there were anthropologists and people of study who quoted or at least translated from some of the traditional people starting about maybe 70 years ago. But they just didn't get the essence. They just didn't get the true value of what these beliefs are, our understanding. We don't separate our constitutional understanding from our way of life. We believe it with our heart, with our mind, and our relationship to the Mother Earth. And Kahnawake was one of the nicest ways to sit with and talk. You know, would you believe it? You know that back in the day when we had some conflicts in our territory, it was us in 1980, Kahnistensera in 1990, Kahnawake 1990. And the politicians, the Minister of Indian Affairs, the head of the police, all had this very negative way to explain our position. They just couldn't get it. And I used to sit there and I used to listen. And they always want, who's the leader? Who's the main one over here? Who's the one in charge over here? We're all in charge. We don't put all our eggs in one basket. Here's a funny thing, and I'm going to. I don't often share this in public. You know those politicians, they're looking for a big burly man, a muscular man. He's the war chief, you know. Rotisken'rhakéhte go. I stand there and say, I'm the war chief. I am. It blows their mind. One time we were in, I believe it was Albany or Plattsburgh, Ganienkeh, and New York State Police, the big wigs, we're going to have a meeting, we're going to discuss issues. And the first is they had to have a round of introductions, give them their name. And I sat there and I thought, why should I give them my name? They're just going to badmouth me. So I thought of a name. I was sitting up, I was looking at a glass wall outside. And I told them, I said, my name is Frank Woods. They wrote it down. That's not my name. It's just a way to distract them. You know, we've been through a lot. Kahnistensera, Rotisken'rhakéhte. We've been through a lot. We had to take a position where it was not, even many of our people didn't understand. Because it's easier to do things in the American way. You can buy and sell in their way. Us, we don't. I want to take a moment and acknowledge those that have gone home before us, who stood up to be Rotisken'rhakéhte. They deserve an honoring. They deserve a recognition. And in our hearts, they have that. They got the 20 gawan na gawa gane those are the words I have chosen to speak to you with. Yeah.
That was Atirun'yadagu 3 weeks ago. Atirun'yadagu is the Ayunwes at Akwesasne, and sometimes they translate that word, well, most times, by war chief, as he was saying, but actually it means the keeper of the house, and who takes care of all issues, and who also brings the voice of the people into council, and especially the voice of the women. So the women and the People's Council have the power also to depose any errant chief, a chief that would stray away from the Kanien'kehá. So that's a provision that's inside the Kanien'kehá to make sure that the chiefs are, respect the ways and don't become corrupted and don't keep power for themselves. So that's the role of the Ayunwes, to act as a relay of the voice of the people, and especially the women. Then I think we'll listen to Kahnistensera. If I remember, he was doing a Thanksgiving address, I think, in the old language. So it's let's hear it for Kahnistensera.
Seko, what one morado, chidicho, was what don't you go near of that, was what they hard the Kahnistensera, you cannot do has a got no, needs walk up that road. What's honey, what there are swears. We were very lucky tonight. I would like to thank each and every one of you for being so patient, waiting for us to get here. We followed Kahnistensera all over Montreal. We pushed it into the iPhone, and that took us the other way. So took us a long way around. I said maybe we should have went away around Vermont to get there. So, anyways, we're here, and that's me. Ganienkeh. I met him when I was a teenager, older teenager, I guess. We used to come up and see the girls in Kahnawake. That's where all the girls were. And so 3 or 4 of us would get together and we'd hitchhike to Kahnawake, spend a weekend there, and sometimes we'd get stuck up there. Well, this one time we got stuck in Don Eagle and Ganienkeh. We're pretty good friends, I guess. Anyway, Don Eagle had a little Jeep, and it was in the winter time. So they volunteered to bring us home because they knew my father. All those old timers back then, they didn't know what a hotel, motel, whatever was. Whenever they went anywhere, they knew people, and those people always opened the door for them and always had a place to stay, always fed them. And that's exactly what happened when they took us home. They were so happy to see each other. 2 nights, they stayed up all night, talked all night, and we listened to all the old stories that they told, that they went through as they were growing up during the Depression, okay? As a Ungahumwe, they talked all in the language. Very seldom there was any English, but it was all in the language. It was beautiful. Some of the old stories that they used to tell. They used to talk politics. You could feel the strength, the belief that they had in who and what they were in the land that was there for our people when we were put here. They believed wholeheartedly, and they taught that to us. My father was a hardliner, and he learned that from that age group. He was a Kanien'kehá along with Louis. Okay. They went different places, communities, to have their meetings. Okay. So that all of the different communities will all be coming from the same position. Not like the way it is now. Everybody is thinking differently. I don't know what we have to do to bring back some of the things that Ganienkeh taught us on what we need to do, our age group, to bring back the younger people back into believing and picking up the responsibilities that we have as a people, not as individuals, but as a people. And we will stay stronger, they told us. I grew up there in a longhouse all my life. English was forbidden in the longhouse. No one spoke English. When you come here, it's who and what we are. It's the only place you have left. It's what we were told. In my lifetime, I've seen that change. It's sad. Ceremonies, the politics slowly change. One word here, a couple words there. Pretty soon, they start coming up. The people don't know what you are saying. They want to know if you can interpret it. So we did. The mind got weaker. It came to the point where now there's only 2 or 3 people in the Longhouse that have the language. And we have now convinced some of the younger people to come to the Longhouse to learn the terminologies that are so important within the Longhouse that the old people taught us never to forget. And that's where we are now because of the strength that they had in their day. Encouragement, they showed us. They didn't only tell us. They put me in position when Ganienkeh was quite strong. So I got to work with Kanien'kehá on the political issues, and I learned more about the American government, the state government, the town government next to us, because we had to deal with them on a real life and death situation. It wasn't play, and I seen that. I learned from that. Not long after Ganienkeh, there was an incident at my home, 1979. An armed encampment broke out for 3 years around my home. Ganienkeh representatives came to back up. People all over came to back up what became an armed encampment. And I guess you could call it a civil war because it was the state police and Mohawk antis on the other side, okay, with the state police on the issues. We came through that. We won it. The people that stayed within the encampment and did not go into the court, all of the charges were dropped. Never had to go to court. The people that went to court lost, and they were charged. Because the attorney used one sentence in a treaty that the St. Regis Mohawk Tribal Council had, which is illegal. Okay. He was told not to use them. He says it won't hurt anything. But the judge took that one sentence, and that's what he used. And all of the people in front of him in court were guilty because they were not the original Mohawk, Iroquois Confederacy people. They were St. Regis Mohawks, okay? So that's what happened there. Kahnawake, the first brick blockade, was a big learning experience too. That brought a lot of people out of their homes and taught them a hands-on situation. It wasn't just stories, it was real. After that, Kahnistensera happened. Another big one. What saved us there was the communications that was in place at the time. If it wasn't for that old cell phone that everybody had at that time, communications would have been lost. But that I think they call it was an iPhone, right? Yeah, it was a big phone anyway, and the reporters all had it, okay? So the reporters, after a while, start letting us use that phone to get information out. At the end of that, it was successful. So again, the hard line to stand up and be proud as Unguhumwe people in our own homeland who accepted, like the Ganienkeh said, when the settlers came to our lands, we accepted them as brothers. The highest honor that we can give to people, we call them brothers. Okay? Members of our natural families. We've learned a lot, and we have so much left to teach the younger people, and this book, I hope, is going to assist us in doing it, bringing the younger minds out of the imaginable world that they have been put in today. It's so hard to find someone to pay attention to you today. You see the restaurants, and couples and families are sitting in the restaurants and they're all looking at that. They're not talking to each other. They're all looking at that. It's sad because they're not talking with each other to get to know each other. So I hope this book is successful out there. Once again, I want to thank you all for being patient with us. Young.
So that was Lorraine Thompson. And we're going to finish with the last video from the Ganienkeh.
I'd just like to kind of add to what everybody's been saying about Kahnawake. He was a very special person, not just to us, but to thousands of Umwehumwe, thousands of people who are not Umwehumwe. He was an inspiration to a lot of people. But one thing I always respected about the man is that he never put himself above everybody else. As much knowledge as he had, and you know, he could have easily promoted himself and so on, and he didn't do that. He promoted people. He promoted learning. He promoted being strong and to believe in who you are. I want to tell you a little story about just how human the man is. Every so often, we have a gathering in the Longhouse. We have what we call social dancing. And that's when everybody would come, grandmothers and grandfathers, aunts, uncles, parents, and all the children to the smallest grandchildren. We'd all come together and we'd sing our songs and we would dance together.
Yeah.
There was no such thing as generation gaps at these gatherings. Grandmother would be dancing, rabbit dance with the grandson. Grandfather would be doing that with the granddaughter. Everybody danced together. We were all one and the same. This one particular time, Kahnawake, he showed up a little bit early and he was sitting in the longhouse by himself. And there was some young kids playing outside. But one of our grandmothers, she showed up and she went inside. And he was sitting there against the wall by himself. So she went and sit next to him. And then all of a sudden she started sniffing. And she looked at him and said, "Rui." He said, "What?" He says, "Did you fart?" And he says, "Of course I did. You think I smell like this all the time?" But that's the kind of guy he was. You could always get a good laugh with him and that. And he wasn't shy, you know, but he was truthful. And you know, it was a good part of him, you know, that he could say, "Hey, yeah, I'm human. You know, I'm not going to pretend," and so on. And that was always a story that I would always remember about him, is how down to earth the man was. And but his teachings go on. And you know, I encourage you all and that to read that book. And you're gonna get to know a bit about him, you're gonna get to know a bit about us, and about the things that we have had to go through. But I want to let you know, this book is very important to us, because there's none of us here that's going to profit from that book. All the proceeds of this book is going to go to the Louis Hall Foundation, which is going to make those monies available to a school that Louis and many of us were involved in starting. It's called, people call it the Indian Way School. And it's a school that is not controlled by band councils, it's not controlled by governments, it's our school. We decide what the education of our children will be. And we know that not long from now, and that things are going to change in our communities. And a lot of funds and that we rely on for our education for our children, that's going to be cut off. And that because of what's called a framework agreement. That elective councils have signed on to agreements with the provinces, and that to come under the jurisdiction of the provinces, and that they will turn our communities into municipalities and start to tax our people. And many of our people are going to lose their homes. Many of our people barely make enough money to keep the lights on and food on the table, and they're not be able to pay taxes. And right now, what the governments do is they give us a piece of paper. It's called a certificate of possession. It's our land, and they certify that we can possess this land, and but we can't own this land. So now they're going to take away that certificate of possession, and they're going to give us titles to the land. Now, what happens is that many of the people having hard times are they need money to try to invest in something. But many of our people don't know how to manage money. They don't really know how that way of life. They're not that familiar with it, especially because of the education that our people received. We are not taught how to use money. And so many of the people are now can go to the banks with this paper and that because now they have title. Now they can collateralize the land. And you know, one thing my grandfather always said, it's easy to borrow money, but it's hard to pay it back. And so many of our communities, because we do not really have any real economy other than a service economy like cigarettes or casinos or stuff like that. But when the new laws come in, that's all going to change. And most of the businesses will be shut down. And so how are the people going to pay for this? And they're going to lose their lands. And because this has happened already. Down in the southwestern part of the United States, there was a thing called the Dawes Act. And that's what was used to dispossess our people of their lands. So many Lakotas, Menominees, Winnebagos, many different Wahua lost all their lands because of what was done. And it took some of them 30, 40 years to finally be, again, recognized that they're Native. But they're not really recognized as Native. It's just that they get this so-called recognition, and all the government did was give them some money, but never returned their lands. And so these people are landless today. You know, they're searching for a connection back to their lands, and this is not allowed because the government would say, if you want to reacquire these lands, you have to buy it. So we're told we have to buy our own lands. And the thing is, where are we supposed to get the monies to buy land? We are supposed to buy back our mother. That's what they're telling us. Buy back your mother. But I just wanted to share a little bit more with you, to tell you that this is ongoing. And there's a 100-year plan that was put there for us in 1924. They determined that it will take them 100 years to assimilate us and to terminate our holdings to our lands. And that now we will become what they say, just like every other Canadian or every other American. But the thing is, we are not Canadian. We are not Americans. We are Wahuma.
Yeah.
And we will always be Wahuma, no matter what they do to us. When they took those children and locked them up in residential schools, They thought they could take the Umbahuma out of them. They can't. They cannot. Because even though many of them were trouble after they came out, the thing is many of them came home. And when I say home, I don't mean their houses. I mean they came home to us. They came to us as people. Yes, they were scarred, but they did come home. And they did struggle to learn our language again. They did struggle to learn about our culture. They did struggle to become a working part of the rest of us. And many of those people, you heard about, maybe some of you are too young, but there was a movement called the American Indian Movement. And many of these people were victims of residential schools. They were victims of all of these policies and so on. And Native people all across the Western Hemisphere came together, worked towards unifying our people, and trying to support and help one another in the best way we knew how, so that our ways would not die, that our children will be able to know who they are, that they will be able to live as who we are, and that we share this knowledge and this way of life with you. And because my grandfather always told us, he says, if the white people don't have peace, we will never have peace. And it says in our Constitution, Kanien'kehá, it says that should anyone wish to find shelter under our symbolic tree of peace, they have only to trace the roots and they can find that shade and comfort under this tree. Because that tree is for all of us, it's for all life. No matter where we come from, we are all from the same creation. And we all have a responsibility to one another, to help one another, to care and share with one another. So I just thought I'd add that little bit, since I'm not one who has a lot of words. Thank you. He gave me some words. He wants me to explain. You're going to see the picture of a flag in that book. On that flag, you see a Nugu'ahua man with his hair hanging down and one feather standing up with a red background and with the sun. When Ganienkeh put that flag together, he explained what his purpose was to make that flag. There's several flags that he'd done, but this one in particular is very important. It shows this man, a Nugu'ahua man, with his hair hanging down naturally. You see, one of the things is, no matter where you travel throughout the Western Hemisphere, all Native people have a certain hairstyle. Men, women, children. That's how you know when you see a Nugu'ahua what family he comes from, what land he comes from, what part of our mother they grew up on. And so he said he didn't want to make one hairstyle for any one of our people. So this is why he left the hair in the most natural way, hanging down. That would symbolize all of the Umbahua people. Then he put one feather standing up. Because all of our people, we always use feathers, mainly the eagle feather. And the reason that one feather is standing is that it's to unify all of us. Because many Umbahua, some have many feathers, they have these bonnets. People like to call them war bonnets, but they're not war bonnets. That's how the people identify who they are. We as Kanien'kehá, we have a much simpler one, and we have 3 feathers standing.
Yeah.
So no matter where you go, everybody has a way of identifying themselves. And so he put that 1 feather standing. He didn't want to put any feathers down, because among some of our peoples, a feather hanging down signifies defeat and surrender. But none of our people, no, everybody had a feather standing. Whether it was 1 feather or not, we all have this. And so that would symbolize the unification of all of our people. The red background was representing the red people, our people. The sun in the background, that represents the men, their duties and their responsibilities to always defend our people, our territories, our way of life. That's what that flag, and that's the one that's called the unity flag. There are other flags that represents just the men. And a lot of people like to call it the warrior's flag, but it's not a warrior flag. It's Rotisken'rhakéhte. That's who we are. And we call ourselves Rotisken'rhakéhte because we have, when our voice changes and we go through the rite of passage ceremony, and in that medicine bag that is made by our mothers, our aunties, our grandmothers, somebody made it for us. And after we've gone through the fast, then a symbol of the medicine, our personal medicine, is put into that bag. When we were born, our umbilical cord, our grandmothers, our aunts, somebody saved that. So once we went through a rite of passage, and we come to start to no longer take for granted our women relatives, and connected us back to them. So this is why the umbilical cord is put in our medicine bag. But also, a third thing was some of the soil from the earth was put in our medicine bag. That's Ogara. That's the soil. That's our mother. And that we would always carry our mother with us. No matter where we went, what we did and everything, every time we touched that bag, it would remind us of all our duties and responsibilities, and that we would do the best to our ability, always to maintain peace and harmony among all peoples. That's the things. This is why these flags and these symbols are very important. It's not something from long ago and should only have been done long ago. It's something that needs to be carried on today. And that, because when people do not teach their sons how important their mothers are, how important their women relatives are, how important their daughters are or their granddaughters, society falls apart. Abuse and sadness is what is created. So we need to help one another to get back these values, because it was not the intent of creation that we try to destroy one another, but to live in harmony. It's like the old people always said, people are like flowers. They're the flowers of the world. And as beautiful as red roses would be, if we turn all the flowers in the world to red roses, and as beautiful as they are, we would quickly get very tired of them. But creation made flowers, different shapes, different colors, different sizes, different fragrances, different purposes. It's like the people of the world. There are so many different kind of people throughout the world. And they say, it's not good to try to turn all people into one. Creation purposely designed all of us for a special purpose. And that's the beauty of all the flowers of the world. When we pull all these flowers together, it makes the most beautiful bouquet, and we would never get sick of all these varieties. Well, it's the same with people. People are like flowers of the world. Together, when we come together and become as one in recognizing and respecting the fact that we all have purpose, and not to try to make everybody the same. This is the beautiful bouquet creation intended for all people to be.
Yeah.
And so this is the kind of things we like to share. A lot of the things that happen makes us angry with one another. But you know what the sad part about it is? It's the everyday people that are taught to discriminate. See, no person is born evil. It's taught. It's taught. And if we teach our children to love one another rather than to hate one another, the world will change. But I look today, a lot of young faces. It's easy today. They're hearing things. They're probably hearing things that wasn't told to you before. But you know something? I'm not really telling you something you don't know. I'm just reminding you of what you really know. So exercise it. Exercise it. Ganienkeh.
Yawa.
Okay. He said, I did okay.
All right, so that was Digarundage. Too bad they can't be there. Digarundage lives pretty close from here, Kahnawake, so next to Kahnawake. But on another occasion, we hope they all get through the COVID without too much harm. Now we have a bit more than 50 minutes left for questions and answers. I don't know if there's stuff on the thread or if people in the room here. Are there questions in the... Awesome. Are we restarting? Yes, we did. Yeah.
Okay, so this is just a question for the panel. I guess with the book, I just wanted to get your take in terms of what would be your message, because you guys helped to create it. And if you can share, what would be that wish, that message that you would like to bring on to the younger generation for how to maintain great peace and also to cherish it and honor it as it is in nature and it is a part of all of us.
Well, the first thing you can do is buy a book and everybody reads it. Every person in Canada should read it. And then you'll have a lot of questions to ask. But I'd like to know what you'd like to do.
By being inspired through the knowledge that was been transpired, okay, today as well. I have not yet read the book, so my first task will be to read it. But just from the presence and also from the words of wisdom that have been shared today, there's been an inspiration to, look into and being able to not only express, do action in order to preserve our land, in order to acknowledge as well in terms of the ancestors and also the people, and to share and to create and to live and to bring peace.
The way I look at this book is this is all what every person should be taught from the time you're born. on how to keep acknowledging and opening your mind and taking care of your mind and not just follow. You're not following. Come to your own conclusions. Take everything that you hear and you make your conclusion on your own. This doesn't tell you what to think, it tells you how to think, how to come up with your own conclusions using everything that's natural around you. To me, that's what Ganienkeh brought all of these things that he studied and all of the people that he's met, all the places that he's been. He took everything and came to a conclusion and he shared that with people. So I think he's an inspiration to actually make people think for themselves. That's what this book is all about. To my understanding of what the way he conducted himself, that was his mission, is to make everybody aware of themselves, aware of their surrounding. And in particular, we were lucky he was a Ngwehunwe person, and he inspired us to keep our natural way alive.
Yeah, and also maybe related to that, like someone was asking a bit earlier how, settler, I have a mic already, how settler peoples can help, and everything. And it's like Ganienkeh was saying that last video, that the tree of peace was made for everyone to, to take shelter underneath it, if they take the time to, to listen, because it's about human beings and it's about reality and the relation between human beings and the rest of creation and how to live in harmony with all that. So it's really, like we were talking about methods for thinking and how to think, like you're saying, there's the word for mind in Ganienkeh, onnikura. It means it takes care of you. It is what takes care of you. And Ganienkeh always says, your brain isn't there just to keep your ears separate. It's there for a reason, for you to use it. And when you use it, it's going to show you what you have to do. But it's really a method. It's not what you have to do, but how you do it and how you deal with all the situations that may come, and cope with the hardships of reality. Reality is both, it's perfect, it's this bouquet with, wide variety of all these amazing things, but it's also a hard place. Animals eat each other and you got to survive to live, you got your brain for that. You have to think, and that's the lesson that I take after, a few years of working on this book, is really how to keep your mind open and think and share ideas and get everyone's input. Maybe Gantineda, maybe you could talk about the consensual decision-making process and how everyone's mind is put to contribution also. And
well, the system that we have, consensual decision-making, is kind of complicated to explain, but we teach it to our children, and you can learn it too. And for example, let's take a look at this, what we call it a land grab culture. And from the time we are little, we know that that's the culture. And you're living in that culture too, of course. It's perpetrated by the opposite people from us. So now, why don't you learn how to do the consensual decision-making process, and then start figuring out how you're going to eliminate this land grab culture. And let's get to the bottom of what happened to our people, the genocide, and let's find out what they did with the bodies of our children. You can learn how to do that. You can learn to express these things among your own people by using you don't seem to be able to do it in your system. Your corporation and all that kind of stuff was just a system whereby you're concerned with the economy, but not about the people. So if you could learn the consensual decision-making process, then you will start to look at life differently, and you'll start to want to learn to find ways to change the way you live, the way the situation is right now. First, you have to recognize that we are in a lot of trouble right now, and we've been fighting forever, ever since we can remember, and you haven't realized it, what we've been going through and what we've done to maintain this culture that we have of maintaining the land, maintaining the children, and so on. So it might be a good idea for you to figure out how you can learn this. And we certainly would be glad to teach you. We have done it to people. People have learned it. So that's one idea I have, but there's lots more.
The other thing is, after you read the book, this is something that's important. A lot of people want information about Ngwehungwe people. Here's some information of the way we conduct ourselves, the things we look forward to. After you've read the book, you may have some questions. Perhaps I can give you a hint, and I'll say it right out, no matter how I sound. Don't go to the band council and ask questions, because they're not going to give you the answers. They're going to give you what the Canadian government wants you to hear. So that's been a big part of this land grab action that we live in. This type of climate that we live in. Every time someone wants information from Ngwehungwe people, they go to band councils to ask the questions, and the band council will not direct them into the right direction, and they'll answer them how Canada wants you to think, and they're going to tell you what they want you to think. And that's what a lot of our education was based on, what the Canadian government wanted us to think. So I think this is a great opportunity to have something for you to think for yourself and make your own decisions. So we're online. Mohawk Nation News has places where you can go on and ask questions and respond, right? And if there's anything that needs to be asked, or that perhaps that's a great way to be contacted.
Just to give you an idea, just the other day, 2 people from McGill came to see us, and just wanted to have a chat. Anyway, they said that they had gone to the band council, and they wanted to find out how they can get in touch with us. And one of the people at the band council told them about us. They were asking questions. And so the person at the band council said about myself, about me, well, it's too bad she doesn't know, I've had 5 children. It's too bad she doesn't know who the fathers of her 5 children are. That's the kind of information they give out to the McGill public and to anybody, really. The false information that comes out right from the band council. And they've always done that to all of us. I'm not the only one. And all of the horrific things that have happened to our children, the band council was always a part of it. And that's why we call them, hired or paid killers, because that's what they've done since 1924, when they became part of the setup of the military encampment called reserves. They've always been in there helping out. And to this very day, that's what they do. And so that's who McGill and everybody else goes to for some help from, and of course, the band council is getting this information from the military. They're part of the military. Look what happened in 1990 when we stood up to them about what was happening in Kahnistensera, and that we didn't want them to take over our burial grounds. They sent in the military, of course. And the reason why they sent in the military? Because we're under the military. We still are. So now, when anybody wants any information from anywhere in the world, and they go to the I said military, I meant the band council. They have people in there who have this kind of information that they gave out against people like us. It's always been that way. Of course, at the beginning, when they were putting in the band council system, they actually sent the RCMP, which are military, into some of the longhouses and shot the chiefs to install this new system. So you know that this is violence, and this is what we've known, and this is what we have seen, and so you can understand the reticence of a lot of our people in trusting anybody. People wonder why we don't trust anybody. That's because that's our history, and still is, by the way.
I can maybe, yeah.
Sego. I'm from Akwesasne, Wolf Clan. My name is Brandon. Legal name Brandon. There's some terms that you can begin to educate yourself with modern day council system compared to a traditional council system. Modern day council system is created by the Canadian government, and everyone under that council system gets paid by the Canadian government. We still have a right to exist today as people because we have a traditional council system that still exists today. A traditional council system that still exists today. Now, how come nobody knows about this? All anyone hears about is the modern day council system. That's where they go get their information because that's all everyone's told about is the modern day council system. That's what makes us who we are as a people. We had 3 people that just went on video and talked about the book. They shared a little bit of who we are. They touched a lot of subjects. They talked about jurisdiction. And they talked about this band office system. Before I changed, I could go on and on and on. I wasn't really ready for this, but that's a way to educate yourself, is to learn the difference between the traditional council system and your modern day council system, and to understand that our true leaders are under our traditional council system, and the leaders that they call chiefs under the modern day council systems are put there by Canada, not by the people that are on our territories. So maybe that's one way you can begin to dispel and begin to help inside of the mind, because that's what we talk about, is the mind. We're having a good mind. We're sharing information. We come from an unconditional place. Our principles as Haudenosaunee is mind, power, peace. So when we talk about the minds, these are the type of things we talk about, is the mind. How do we become one mind? How do we come to an agreement? That's one way to begin to come to one mind, is to understand that that's what's happening to us as a people. They won't talk to anyone, and when it comes to making decisions about our land, and when we go into court systems, like a lot of us are representing ourselves now, we're dealing with court systems, we get dragged into court. They won't communicate or identify the traditional council system. They'll only communicate and talk with their modern day council system. And last I knew, that was an act of genocide. And that's still going on today, even though they still put words out there, reconciliation. They say these sorries. They create a day, Indigenous Day. It's all these fillers, Band-Aids. So when we talk about what can you do to help us as Haudenosaunee people, we can begin by the land. The land is what we need to have the conversation about. No. I know, I wanted to go into it, but.
Yeah, do we? We got time? I was just gonna follow from what he said about the land, and there's so many things that run through my mind, and like what people can do as Canadians besides considering yourself a Canadian settler is like looking into your origins and where you come from and your nationality, because these aren't Canadian. There's no such thing. Canada, that was derived from our language, like Ganada is like the village. But being Canadian, where you came from, when you came on those ships, are your ancestors, is like, learn your culture, learn your language, learn your identity, because that'll give you a connection, because honestly, you lost your connection to your lands when you came here. We were born from this land and this earth, and we have our culture and our language and our identity still intact. And that's where we get our strength from, and where I can stand my ground and say, no, you're not gonna take this land, and there's no price. Like the Band Council can take $42 million and say, yeah, we surrendered it and you can take the land and do as you please, but not that. The Band Council, when you look into it, not everybody votes. So that Band Council only represents a small percentage of people who actually participate in that system and vote in their elections. And probably everybody at this table doesn't vote. So our voices aren't heard in what we have to say when it comes to our land and the decisions that are made amongst our people. So when it comes to the land right now, I know for a fact, everyone's talking about these pipelines and everything and resource extraction, and there's new things that are coming up with the seaway. You talk about rare earth elements and metals, and they're gonna start extracting those from our lands here, because we're the second highest, like after Asia, Canada's the second one they're gonna go to. So they're gonna start exposing, they're mining around First Nations, and they're exposing our people to naturally occurring radiation, and there's not been any studies done on it. They're using studies that were done on the radiation that's used in like nuclear power right now, but there's never been studies done. So they're gonna be exposing our people and our children to that next. There's one mine that's near Kahnistensera that's happening. This is gonna be coming up. So we can be proactive instead of reactive to the situation when it's already occurring. Start educating yourself, because that's gonna contaminate our land even further. And that doesn't just affect us, that affects everybody. And not only that, they're gonna try to probably transport it on those ships that come through our waters and come through our territories. They're gonna try to make sure that it only impacts us. That's why there's 3 plants around Akwesasne, and why we have such high heavy metal concentrations in our rivers, and why we can't eat our fish more than once a month. So there's a lot of things that are going on in our environment that affect Jews too. So educate yourself, because if you look closely at the territories, that's where you'll find that these mines are, and resource extraction and every contamination, it's gonna be happening around us, not around these cities, not where it's populated with people that are Canadian and don't give the government problems. They're gonna wanna get rid of us first.
Maybe there's about the Band Council, maybe, okay, a question?
One second, if you wouldn't mind speaking into the microphone so people on Zoom can hear you.
Thanks. Yeah, considering the federal government's current policies of municipalization and essentially terminization, people wanting where to go for information, I wanted to know your opinion on the work that Russell Dybel's been doing about that and his analysis of the background. You know, is that a good and valid source, and anybody's opinion on it, please?
I don't think.
I would just say follow Russell Dybel's work on his Facebook profile page to figure out all the work and knowledge that he's been bringing to the table. Go on his Facebook page, Russell Dybel, and look at all the information he's been laying out. No one can speak on his behalf for the work he's been laying out.
I saw someone writing in the chat, we don't have to be represented by anyone, as when we represent ourselves. We all don't identify as being represented by any of the current systems other than Kanien'kehá. Then he goes on to say, Russell Dybel has been a policy analyst employed by Canada. So, yeah. There's just one story from the timeline in the book that I wanted to tell, just a short paragraph, just to explain, you know, the history of the Band Council for Haudenosaunee peoples. Akwesasne itself, 1899. Actually, the story started in 1894. 1,200 people gathered in Akwesasne for the Grand Council of the Six Nations Confederacy. The council formally rejected the Indian Act and announced that it would restore its traditional governance structure. Supporters of the traditional government successfully blocked Band Council elections twice in 1898 and 1899. Yet on May 1st, 1899, federal Indian agents lured Akwesasne traditional chiefs called Rotinuncuiseres, or long hairs, into attending a meeting where they were supposed to discuss the construction of a bridge. When Chief Onondaga Jake Fire entered the room and saw the Canadian Dominion police officers accompanying the Indian agents, he protested, and the shouts were heard outside, and quickly alerted the community that something was going wrong. Onondagon's brother, Sayo Wizakerun Jake Ice, rushed in the room, and Dominion Police Lieutenant Colonel Percy Sherwood shot him in the body twice, killing the chief on the spot. 7 chiefs were imprisoned after the event, 5 of whom remained in jail for more than a year. Following this raid, representatives from the Canadian government formed the first Mohawk Band Council in history, with Mohawk individuals which they had handpicked and selected. So that's the beginning of the how it was imposed. Yeah. Yeah, they were in prison for a year before it was imposed, traditional leaders.
I think for me, one of the things that I found inspiring about, this collaboration we did and this history and this kind of example that they showed was, for them, it was also, even though the people we spoke to grew up in traditional families and had these elders around that they could kind of draw on, it was also this act of a reimagining and a kind of a creation, where they had to rethink what was the Warrior Society, what could it be. There was this sort of these younger people in the late 60s and early 70s that found themselves frustrated by all the things they're talking about, but wanting to kind of have a different approach, and should try to rekindle or rebuild something that might be called the Warrior Society. And even this act of translation of kind of using that term in English, and there's the stories in the book of creating, logos, and, Louis Hall as an artist, these iconographies of the flag and kind of back patches and leather jackets, that there's this kind of work that's happening that's sort of a reinterpretation or a translation or an adaptation by different people of different generations. And I think for me, that's inspiring to think about what are the ways that ongoing generations have to think about, reimagining these legacies that we might be able to draw on from different radical traditions from wherever we might be from or whoever we might be from. So both kind of getting to know your histories and these legacies of struggle, but also trying to reimagine them and readapt them, because I think precisely this generation of the Warrior Society, that's what they did, in the early 70s. And I think, even as everyone's speaking about these conflicts with the band councils and tribal councils, even this story that's in the book about when they do the occupation at Ganienkeh, they kind of decide to leave the reservation and kind of go reclaim land and go reclaim territory, because they no longer wanted to be in these conflicts, these internal kind of civil war conflicts like Loran was talking about. And they said, what if we kind of occupied a new place and just started a new kind of territory or zone or commune or whatever, where we could live amongst ourselves in new ways or something. And this was in 1974. And like I said, it continues to exist in upstate New York. And I think these kind of this kind of spirit of experimentation, so using this tradition of the Men's Council, this Men's Fire, but kind of adapting it in new ways depending on who's around and what's around and what are the conditions. I think this is something in the book and this story and this example that I find inspiring, to think about the Mohawk Warrior Society, both in this kind of long term, but specifically this kind of reimagination of what that might be in the 70s. And I think the book kind of does what we hope is a kind of good job of pointing to an example of how you can reimagine and rebuild a kind of radical organization with traditions, but it's also a new thing, a new entity. And I think, hopefully other people in different contexts and different ethnicities and different territories and different regions can also think what that might mean and what that might look like for whoever you are, wherever you are.
Can I jump in? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to just piggyback very quickly off of what Matt was saying and throw into the mix also the idea of humor. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, throw into the idea that mix the idea of humor. One thing that struck me about Louis Hall's work was the tremendous use of the sense of play, and as Dadarongade was saying, the idea of his humanness. Because I think oftentimes now in movements we're very serious, which is good, but we forget that there's also, I mean, politics is also, there's a sense of our own humanness and our own vulnerability and our own, sometimes I think we often use this idea of an ideal. Oftentimes a lot of, especially on the left, we have this rationalist idea of a kind of utopic ideal that's beyond humanity. Whereas what was interesting about the warriors was that their ideal was humanity, was nature, and was being human in a biological way. And so I think that sense of being earthy, this idea of play, of creating a world through play and through being playful, and this idea of humor and taking yourself seriously, but that being to take yourself seriously and not seriously at the same time, actually. That one doesn't counteract the other. And that was actually something we noticed not only on reservations, but also in Palestinian refugee camps, was we expected people to be very serious and, you know, kind of militant, which they were, but people were also very capable of joking and being playful about their situation, particularly the people who actually lived in the reservations or lived in the refugee camps. And I just wanted to throw that in, especially in terms of Louis Hall's work as a satirist, because a lot of, when you read his texts, which are in the book, he uses humor and satire to a great degree. And there's this incredible sense of playing around when he's writing. I mean, he's serious, but he's also playing. And the two can reinforce each other in very interesting ways. And I think that's something to keep in mind in our politics, but also maybe to keep in mind when reading his work. So I just wanted to throw that in there too.
I think Kahnistensera's very similar when she writes. I love reading when she writes down our experiences. She throws satire in there. She puts cartoons in there that were already exist, but just fit perfectly with what's happening with us. Sometimes she puts music in with it, and it's incredible how it's like a skit on Saturday Night Live of something, you know, and they're mimicking some kind of politicians or something. But I think that Louis Hall was our first social media man. He Degarundege had told us a story about and I just told it to the art teacher because she had to leave. She was asking me about his artwork, and I had told her a story that Degarundege told me from back when well, he's my cousin. His father is my grandfather. This is my mother. And when he was a little boy, they were trying to build a longhouse and get the people. It was a very small group of people that were able to kind of quietly get some people back together and start like bringing our ways back to the surface and not being so hidden anymore. And so he lived that life with my mother and my grandfather and their family. And so he's telling us stories along the way, and he said that when they were young men, him and his friends had it was a singing society, and they would go travel around to different territories, and we're trying to rekindle our songs, right, and our ceremonies and such. But this was a sing society, and they would go around, and they would compare songs and learn new songs or old songs that were forgotten and bring it back to Kahnawake and then practice them here. And they said they wanted some way to show that they were all like our society. When we show up at a sing, they recognize who we are, kind of thing. And they took one of Louis' artwork and they put it on a patch, and they went to the now you can get patches like this, right, online and whatever. And he went to a printer or whatever, and they embroidered him a patch to put so they could put it on their jackets. And when the man told him, he says, well, it's going to cost you this much money. He says, you only want 7 patches? And he's like, well, yeah, you know, there's 7 of us. And he says, well, for the same price, I could give you 200. And they were like, oh, what? Maybe we can make some money out of this, you know? So he took, they said, okay, then make us the 200. So they put the patches on their jacket. They said, what are we going to do? We'll sell them for $2 each or something like that, right? Then they're like, nah, never mind. We'll just give it to everybody that comes to the sings, right? So next thing you know, they had Louis Hall's patch. And it was everywhere because they go to a sing, you got a patch, you know? And all the youngsters in the community had this patch on. And it was all like mostly young men, but it was young women, but it was, which one was it? Well, this is the woman warrior, but it's similar to it. It's a man. On this one, there's another one, and it's a man, and it's on a round patch. So that became that it brought to the surface the Warrior Society, because they were a society that had their interests set and their ways set that they wanted to bring back just what was our way. And it's not about overpowering somebody. It was, and not thinking of this, we don't want this great utopia where we have tons of money and there's fawns running everywhere. We just want our natural way to survive and be living with nature in harmony. That's what they wanted. And they all had that ideal, which was ideal. And so then, because those individuals looked like a group, that's ultimately how I understand that it became the Warrior Society. They were all ones who were fighting to bring our ways back to the surface. So that's the Warrior Society. She's cute. Right?
Are there any more questions or comments? You can say what you want. Don't forget, you're free here. Yeah.
There's one comment from Kevin Kunkel. If all First Nations people came together, we would be very powerful. However, our people need to get back to community and togetherness.
I so agree with that, but at this moment, and I think it can be done. I'm hopeful, and I can see it. What a big problem is within our communities is that having that Canadian-ness government in our community, it draws lines in the sand. Unfortunately, people within the band council system, we all have big families. My mother's one of 14. I don't even know how many is in her family, but they have, they're big families. Now, when you have one individual that's working for the band council, what is their family gonna do when it comes time to oppose their decision? Well, I can't go against it. My aunt is gonna, she's gonna have the repercussions on her and such, whatever. So it's very, very finicky on how you can erase those lines that are drawn, imaginary lines that are drawn within our community. And I have the solution. Ganienkeh. If we use our clan system, Ganienkeh, whether you're band council members or affiliates or whatever, but there's a large base that the band council employs in our community. But if we all went back to our system of the way we work, that would erase those lines. Because right now there's 5-6 different entities in our community, and it doesn't need to be like that. I agree. If we go back to our ways and we get into our clans, I've said this before, it's the most sophisticated problem-solving, decision-making way on this planet. That would be a solution.
I'm just gonna follow off what she said about these solutions and the band council. I can't remember exactly, but two things crossed my mind, and it would be a good way to support is our economy on the reserves. If you think about the employment, probably 3/4 are employed by the band council. So Canada technically employs the majority of our people. And then they have gag orders. So like you said, like anyone wants to support my camp, they'll lose their job because I'm going against the grain. I'm going against Canada and the band council. So 3/4 of the population in Akwesasne can't support me because they'll lose their employment and they'll lose their way to feed their families. Because of our economic system, they try to control with licensing and everything like that. And what we need to get back to is our own sovereign economic system. So when we have like basket making our own crafts, like pretty soon they're gonna try to tax that and try to control that like they do with like the cannabis. We had fought for our right to have the cannabis and not be licensed through Canada, so they're not controlling our way that we're dispersing our medicines and using it. And then on top of that, you think about getting back to community and our minds coming as one. It really comes down to the education system. So it's really great to hear that every proceed from this book is gonna go towards this Indian Way school, because the education system is where it interferes with our people and how we think, because we're being taught through a curriculum that's basically not teaching you to think for yourself. They're teaching you to repeat what's told to you and not question it. And what they're saying with this book is that it's teaching you how to think for yourself. So when you think of education system, just remind yourself of who's publishing those books and who's funding it and what their agenda is, because when it really comes down to it, anyone can benefit from this book and to think for yourself. And then you'll realize very quickly that there is really no truth and there is no reconciliation.
Just like to continue to add, there's a reason why we even have to have these conversations of coming back to the land and learning who we are as our identity, is because everything we've been through, our history, all the genocide. So I think when I came in, we were talking about court cases and how we're representing ourselves, right? And I think everyone up here has been dragged into the Canadian court system when we're all representing ourselves as Haudenosaunee. So basically, from our understanding, and I think maybe we can all agree, is this is the first time we're exerting our Haudenosaunee jurisdiction inside of the Canadian jurisdiction system. And that has a lot to do with identity, who we are, everything that we talked about, this book, all the work and knowledge that they put in, those three individuals that were up there talking. I met her before I met those three individuals, and I met her a long time ago. And for me personally, it lit my personal fire. And what keeps us all connected, we're a web of relationships. We all have personal fire, clan fires, nation fires, just a little bit of glimpse of who we are as people. And what's cool is when we begin to represent ourselves in court, for instance, with our clan family, it began to light that fire because it's teaching us how to communicate and talk again, and to be able to actually lay something out the first time. Because you have to remember, this is the first time in history after 1492 that we're able to heal. Because day one after 1492, we've been on our heels, and we never had time to rest or even think about what happened to us. So me personally, I'm grateful for her. I'm grateful for her and her family and the three individuals that helped make this book, because it helped light my personal fire. And right now I'm seeing how it's lighting other fires that are connected to our web of relations of Haudenosaunee people.
I think I might come up with another definition that's in the book here, where you're talking about fire, the word gawajire, which means family, and literally means the gathering of all embers, in reference to the family's hearth in the longhouse. The family is a fire created when each person Otsire, or ember, gathers with his relatives to create a flame and intensify the heat. Families don't only include biological relatives, as clans cross the borders of nations in such a way that Mohawk members of the Wolf Clan are considered to be members of the same family as Wolf Clan members of other Haudenosaunee nations, and even beyond the Iroquoian language group. When the fires, the families, the Gawajire of all clans reunite in a grand council of the Confederacy, it creates a Gatsanhoana, or a big fire. The idea of fire is also related to how decisions are arrived at in councils. Even though it may look like a fire is out, meaning that a decision has been arrived at, it is still necessary to stir the ashes to make sure that all the coals are burnt out. The coals that are still burning represent those who did not voice their opinion yet and whose insight might still be necessary to ensure a full consensus. That's the way. So we also have someone saying here, those who have stepped outside our circle are always welcome back. It is a choice to come back to our ways, Kanien'kehá. And Louis Hall himself, had been, Ganienkeh had been groomed for priesthood. At first he was supposed to be a Christian, but he came back, and many traditionals did that. And we are to be a system of families, clans, according to the circle wampun, huh? Is that, yeah? Revitalization of Unwe support those revitalizing those ways.
That's the 49 families. That's who we are throughout the Haudenosaunee. I'd like to ask you a question. I'd like to know what impression you have. Does this all seem kind of complicated to have all these relationships that we have with each other as families and clans and so on, and how we function and how are you starting to understand it a little bit, or you find it very difficult to understand this? And then at the same time, to have the Canadian government and all of these other organizations trying to mess you up and get you to completely not understand who we are. We are the original people, the ones that are band council members, work with the military, with the government to commit this genocide. They always have been from the beginning. And this genocide, it's called the business plan. I don't know if you understand all of these things we've been telling you. It is kind of difficult. Is there something about it that you find unusual, or have you ever heard of anything like this with any other people in the world? Do you know anything like this? How people live in a natural way, the way we do, and the way we continue to do it, and the way we will always continue to do it. And we have gone through a lot to maintain this. Do you understand? Does anybody understand what we're talking about here?
It's the beginning. At least we can have this open dialogue. I mean, it's a start. It's a start for others to educate themselves and ask questions. That's what you do. You ask questions constantly. Why? What does this mean? Those are the important questions. Why are you doing this? What is this for? Who created this, and why did they create this? These are the questions that need to be happening. Everybody seems like, I'm looking outside right now, and there's people just walking back and forth. Most of them are students, so they're looking for something. Their mind is open, and they want information, and they want to know. But at the same time, we stood in the middle of McGill at one time, and I looked all around. I said, every book in all of these buildings, imagine we went through all of them and took all the falsehoods out of them. There'd be no more books in here. So everybody needs to do their part. these individuals put some valuable information, some valuable thinking devices into this, and I'm appreciative of it, and I'm happy you all came to listen, to get a little glimpse of our minds, I guess, and I'm happy to share it. And if you have any kind of questions for me in the future, I mean, if you go on Mohawk Nation News, there's place to put information. There's information over there of email addresses. There's phone numbers and such. If you ever have a question, you know who to come. You know how to come to.
Don't go to the band.
Speaking for myself, I was kind of lucky.
Can you?
On my dad's side, both my grandparents were from England. Nevertheless, from the time I was like 5, 6 years old, my grandfather, who was from Manchester, put me on his knee and showed me this picture of this Iroquois warrior and explained to me what the Confederacy was, et cetera, et cetera. And so I knew that stuff growing up, and on my mother's side also put that into me. But when the Oka crisis happened, I was astounded. I was like 34 years old. I was astounded by how little everybody else from my background, European background, how little they knew. You know, like I figured this was a given that you would at least know that you know, this was Indian country and that our lives had been, as the expression was used, our lives were better because of it, because we weren't starving in Manchester or Ireland or whatever it was. And so I thought that people had a basic foundation, which they don't. Now, since the last 30 years, obviously, the federal government and the media and stuff is always, you know, we have Indigenous days, as you pointed out, all these, in many ways, empty symbols and a way to tidy things up and brush the reality of the history.
Under the rug.
Yeah, keep it under the rug. And, you know, I hear like, let's do like every time I hear a land acknowledgement, I understand why people do it. But okay, so you acknowledge your unceded land, well, give it back or pay some friggin' rent. You know, like put some substance into what's going on here. So I think one of the things about education of like settlers and non-native people is to beware of the massive propaganda machine that the federal government is, you know, they're no longer saying what they said 40 years ago, these people are savages and that, but aren't they nice? You know, isn't these lovely ways? And, you know, like you were saying, little fawns jumping around and all this kind of stuff. It's a cover-up, a huge cover-up.
There's something too that you might want to know. Ganajah, what it means. Do you know the real meaning of that word Ganajah? It's Ganajah means squatters. That's what Canada is. That's where it comes from, a Mohawk, from the Mohawks, but we didn't tell anybody what it really means. They asked us, can you know, what do you call us? And so we told them. And then they started using it, and then now they're called Ganajah.
It was
And
that satire kicking in. It was that satire. See, she's laughing because it was a joke. This is ganado. This is your ganado.
Yes. And when you when you bend down and put your ganado down on the floor. It started out from the fact that we said, okay, you can have a little piece of land and you can plant just one shovel depth, yeah. And then that was it. That's all they were supposed to be allowed to use, and we would help them and we would help feed them. So then we saw that they were taking more and more land and it was just getting worse and worse and worse. And so we saw them there, you know, and they were increasing the size of the land that they were using, and they weren't asking us, they just started taking it. So they say it comes from the word ganada, but it comes, ganajah, it comes from ganajah, which is what we say when somebody bends down and puts their ass, sajja, you know, you put your ass down on the ground, drag your ass around, and that's what we say, ganajah. And then we started calling them that, but they never asked us what it meant. So we never told them until a couple of years ago. Mohawk Nation News decided to expose it. And there's even a song on there. revising O Canada to Okanagan. Okanagan. You squat on native land. Anyway, you can listen to it, it's there. But you see, and then I met Mark Miller, and I said, you say that you speak Mohawk. Yes, I do. I said, so I started talking to him in Mohawk. I said, do you know what Ganajan means? Well, it means a village. It comes from the word Canada. We have no nouns in our language. That's another interesting thing, because life is always a moving thing. So it had to be an action. So that's what we called him. He said, I said, well, who told you that? Because that's not what it means. So I explained it to him. And I said, you've given yourself away. Every time you see a truck go by and it says Canada, such and such, and everything is Canadian, and we laugh because we know what it means, because Canadians are calling themselves what they are, squatters. And I told him that. I said, you give yourselves away. Everywhere you turn, it's there, it's there. So I just thought I'd let you know that for your own information. I thought it might be interesting.
Can I say something? Let me see, I don't know how to say it. I'm not a good speaker. You know, everything that the United States and the Canadian governments live off of, if it is all from our resources.
Yeah.
And they're still kicking us.
She's a very few words. Right to the core. Just like gonna jump.
Yeah, I think now we're just after 4, so we'll have to wrap up. Maybe, well, I really appreciated the last comments there, and about Mark Miller and what you were saying just before, you know, the cover-up that's happening right now. Mark Miller recently, a couple of weeks ago, they had a signature in Kanien'kehá of a land deed. They finally, you know, solved after 200 years that they couldn't solve that land deed problem, and they just called a meeting with those with a couple of chiefs and didn't tell anyone, and they signed that paper. But in the interview with the press afterwards, Mark Miller was saying, well, actually it's hard because, you know, we got to work within the framework of the Indian Act, but it is a racist document. He was acknowledging that the legal framework is of a racist, you know, nature. But the thing is, the way they're doing it now with those kinds of, you know, land deeds and new land settlements is the municipalization, you know, and so they're saying, okay, well, we have to get over the Indian Act, but so we'll turn you into Canadians and regular citizens. And everything that happened also with the acknowledgement of the genocide and the Pope coming and everything, that's the huge risk that's being put to there, is thinking that, you know, you just need the Pope to wear a headdress, you know, and it's going to solve the problem. It's as if that was a true settlement. But just wanted to say that this is very much ongoing, you know, this way of trying to do as if we were getting over it, while there's actually nothing concrete being done. And genocide is a serious thing. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No.
They want to turn us into Ganajan. On our own land. Squatters. They want us to be squatters, like they are. So, let me ask. What? The mayor of Dundee called me a squatter. But you see, it's starting to get known. But the other question is, you know, if you were in our place, what would you do? If you were Mohawks, what would you do in this situation? It's not a laughing matter, but we get through it, you know, because we do see things in a funny way too. So what would you do?
What?
think I'm being asked to both answer that question and
Uh,
possibly wrap up.
I was more wrapping up, yeah,
More
yeah,
of a
but you can
wrapping up.
answer if you got
Well,
the answer.
I don't know what I would do if I were Kanien'kehá because I'm not. And one of the things I've really learned from listening to all of you today is that because I do not come from this land, because I do not have the beautiful moving picture language that you have been sharing with us, I cannot know what it would be to be in your shoes. But I think what I can do and what I've been trying to do over the last few months is to stand beside you and to know that I'm standing on land that isn't mine and will never be mine, and to be more and more and more open to the ways that I have been not even so much taught the wrong thing as taught nothing. And that is the privilege and the crime of white settlership in Canada, squatterland, as I now know. We don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And that's why this book is so important. And to spend time together is so important. And I think that although it's only a tiny bit of time, in fact, in the grand scheme of things, these 2 days give us the most important opportunity that I can think of, which is to spend time together, to listen to your knowledge, your stories, the words that are starting to come to us, the art, the resistance, but also the love that I hear in everything you're saying. And I hope that by the end of the 2 days, I know better how to stand beside you. And so maybe I will say just thank you very much to everyone who came. And I know some of you have come in solidarity, and maybe there will be words tomorrow and maybe there won't be, but thank you for your presence. Thank you for coming such a long way, Jackie and family. And thank you for also coming the long way from Kahnawake, because it's not very close. Even though we're neighbors, it's about as hard to get there as you can imagine. I know you guys know. Thank you to, oh yes, you women. That's a Canadianism, settler squatterism. So thank you very much for being here. And I'm not sure how many will be coming back tomorrow, but I hope as many of you will come as you have time to come. And I hope as many of you will come back tomorrow as you have time to come. And we'll be starting at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. We will have some more coffee and treats for you. And, and then we will have 2 screenings. The first is Mohawk Nation, which is a documentary that was made about some of the struggles we've heard about today, made in 1978. And it is actually a very hard print to get, but we have a copy now at Concordia. And so we'll be able to watch that together. It's less than an hour long. And then I think right after that, we'll go from one film to the next, maybe with a little coffee break, because we all like our coffee. But then we'll be seeing a new film that has been released, I believe, this year, 2022, made by a filmmaker from Kahnawake, Roxanne Whitebean. And the film is called Rose. And it's quite a short film, but it's a historical, it's based in history. And then we'll have another discussion where we can respond to the film, we can ask questions, we can hear from elders and community members from Kahnawake, and enjoy some more shared time together, which we need so much of. So thank you again. Thank you to all of you for being here. And I believe that Jacqueline had one last thing she wanted to say, if she's here. Yes, okay.
We oftentimes just wrap it up. So this is just me saying thank you again for joining us today here at Fourth Space. We were live streaming this. We're going to go ahead and close up the Zoom, but it will be uploaded to YouTube immediately after. So thank you again for joining us for day 1 of the Mohawk Warrior Society book launch and film screenings. Hope to see you tomorrow.